Chapter 8:25. The endless yellow sand stretched into the distance without end. There was no sign of human habitation. Broken walls and ancient cities of the past had worn away the totem murals, leaving only a monotonous yellow that spoke of the vicissitudes of 1,000 years. A few withered poplars twisted and stretched their withered bodies. Their withered branches pointed at the transparent blue sky, like hands struggling to break free from the sea of sand, only to be buried by the yellow sand in the end. Li Qingshan stood at the top of a sand dune and saw everything. "This is the Mirage Sea. It should just be an illusion," Little An said. The sound of the wind carried their voices into the distance. Li Qingshan crouched down and grabbed a handful of sand. The grains of sand flowed between his fingers. Not a single grain could be seen as fake. There was even a voice telling him from the bottom of his heart that all of this was real. Under the guidance of the Banyan Tree King's sea map, they found the legendary Mirage Sea without much effort. Although he knew that the Mirage Sea was not simple after Little An's warning and might even contain great danger, he still chose to enter the Mirage Sea due to his trust in the Banyan Tree King and the Spirit Turtle's divination. There was no danger to his life here, so he still chose to enter the Mirage Sea. As expected of the Clam King of Mirage Sea, this illusion is flawless. However, while it's strange for a sea of sand to appear in the sea, it's not imaginative at all. Li Qingshan smiled and revealed his pure white fangs. "But if we can't break the illusion, how can we find the Clam King of Mirage Sea?" Little An said. "Watch me." Li Qingshan said loudly, "Clam King of Mirage Sea, this one is Li Qingshan. I have come to the Mirage Sea to pay a visit under the guidance of the Banyan Tree King. Please show yourself. This is a visitation card." The sound wave spread into the distance like a tiger's roar and created ripples on the sea of sand. However, there was no response. There was only the sound of the wind. Li Qingshan could not help but be surprised. He reached into his Sumeru ring, but the visitation card that the Banyan Tree King had written for him was nowhere to be found. How was this possible? The Sumeru ring was equivalent to an independent space. Was the Clam King of Mirage Sea really this powerful? "Qingshan." Little An pulled Li Qingshan's sleeves and pointed to the distant sky. At the end of the sea of sand, there was a tall building that connected the sky and the earth. It looked a little vague in the heat waves. "Let's go and take a look." Li Qingshan could not understand how he had lost the visiting card, so he decided not to think too much about it. Since the Clam King of Mirage Sea had already responded, everything would naturally become clear once they met and talked. She didn't use her phoenix wings and flew side by side with Little An. They flew very low, and the airwaves they set off plowed a long gully in the sea of sand, forming waves of sand. Under the illumination of the sun, they flashed with a golden light, extremely magnificent. Li Qingshan made a great vow to travel thousands of mountains and rivers and enjoy all the beautiful scenery in the world. Even though he knew that this sea of sand was an illusion, it was enough for him to enjoy. He looked at Little An beside him. Her skin was like jade, and her clothes were whiter than snow. Her black hair fluttered in the wind like a long ribbon. Her black and white were distinct, and there was only a slight smile on her red lips. She was so beautiful that she seemed like the spirit of the world, or even some kind of spirit that had gathered together. Perhaps it was the effect of this wondrous illusion, but Li Qingshan felt like this was the first time he had seen her like this. He also felt like he had been attached to her for 1,000 years. His eyes involuntarily gathered on those red lips, and for a moment he was mesmerized. He almost wanted to kiss them, but he suddenly shook his head and threw this strange thought out of his mind. Little An only focused on him, so peaceful that it was like she was breathing. Li Qingshan suddenly smiled, and a child's heart stirred. He flew away from Little An and circled around the sea of sand. He used the airwaves to write 2 large, crooked words. Little An also smiled, and flew up to write the 3 words Li Qingshan, but it was graceful and neat. Li Qingshan was not convinced, and wrote the 2 words 9 heavens. Finally, it was a lot more square, and he could not help but laugh out loud. His hearty laughter shook the sand dunes below, and a stretch of gold flowed down. Little An also laughed, and her laughter was like silver bells, ethereal and dreamy. They continued forward, and the wind and sand behind them gradually buried the words they had written, leaving no trace. They flew and played all the way, but the mirage in the distance, this was the name he had given to the tower, was even further away than he had imagined. It only became a little bigger after flying for a long time. Li Qingshan also stopped playing and stared at the mirage in the sky. The scope of the mirage sea could not be so large. It seemed like it was just as little and said, this trip was not so simple. He hoped that it was just a test. Little and still did not change her expression, and looked at his back as if she was breathing heavily. Then, they sped up and flew straight toward the mirage. Suddenly, Li Qingshan's heart skipped a beat. A yellow line rose from the horizon, covering the mirage that connected the sky and the earth behind it. The yellow line gradually became smaller. It's a sandstorm. If it was just a natural sandstorm, Li Qingshan naturally would not care, but this was the Clam King of Mirage Sea's illusion. This sandstorm was definitely not so simple. Not only did the sandstorm cover the sky and the earth, it was also endless. Let's go down and hide for a while. I don't believe that it can blow us away. Li Qingshan said, and brought Little and to the ground, under a stone pillar that was almost drowned in yellow sand. This place was also in ruins, but the only thing that could protrude out of the sea of sand was this enormous stone pillar. There were some incomprehensible words and blurry images carved on it, but they all felt vaguely familiar. Li Qingshan looked closely. He did not know whether to laugh or cry. The words were English, which he had learned in his previous life, and the images were mathematical numbers. However, these things did not exist in this world. Could this illusion actually reflect one's thoughts? There was no time to think carefully. The whistling grew louder and louder, as if there was a huge mouth that connected the sky and earth blowing. In the blink of an eye, the sandstorm swallowed them and the sky darkened. Li Qingshan discovered that his choice of hiding behind the stone pillar was the correct one. The intensity of the sandstorm actually made even his mind waver. He pulled Shaoan into his arms instinctively, but as he gazed into the distance, he was actually unable to see what was happening 30 meters away. He sighed inside. If this kind of power remained in the sky, they would definitely be blown away. The stone pillar carved on it was like a rock, allowing the sandstorm to attack it. I wonder when it will pass, Li Qingshan said to Little and who was as light as a feather in his arms, and hugged her even tighter. Little and said something, but her voice was swallowed by the wind. What did you say? Li Qingshan asked telepathically. Before Little and could answer, he suddenly heard a bull's moo. It passed through the sandstorm clearly. The sound was so familiar and intimate, as if it was ringing in his heart. Li Qingshan stood up and looked over. In the dark sandstorm, the blurry silhouette of an old bull was looking back at him. Li Qingshan's eyes widened. He clearly saw a broken horn on the bull's head. Although he could not see it clearly, he was sure that it was green. He could not help but be shocked. This was the greatest secret hidden in his heart. It was even greater than his transmigration and reincarnation. Reincarnation and the memories of one's past life were nothing in the world of the 9 states. However, the existence of the green ox far surpassed this world. It was an existence above the 6 paths of reincarnation and above the 9 heavens. Shaoan, who was beside him, seemed to have seen nothing and leaned quietly in his arms. Was this also an illusion created by the Clam King of Mirage Sea? But it was too real. The ordinary oxen gave off an indescribable presence. The sandstorm and even the entire Mirage Sea seemed to distort as if it could not hold on. Wait for me, Li Qingshan said before rushing towards the black ox. Even if it was a hallucination, he wanted to see the big brother who had given him everything and parted with him for a very long time again. Little and reached out to grab the hem of his clothes, but it slipped out of her hands powerlessly. She watched as his figure disappeared into the sandstorm. The sandstorm was stronger than Li Qingshan had expected. Even with his strength and cultivation, it was difficult for him to move. The enormous force pressed down on him, forcing him to bend his body and walk towards Oxen. Oxen waved its tail and turned to walk into the sandstorm with its usual calm attitude. Li Qingshan's call was blown away by the sandstorm. His heart skipped a beat and he looked back. The sandstorm obscured his vision. He was unable to see the stone pillar and Shaoan in the sea of sand. Suddenly he felt rather lost, but he had no time to think too much about it. He chased after the black ox as hard as he could. The world was dusky yellow. Only that figure was clear. It was leading him into the unknown. But no matter how Li Qingshan chased, that figure was so far away. It gradually moved further and further away until it completely disappeared into the sandstorm. A bull's moo came from the distance. So it was just an illusion? Li Qingshan panted as he knelt on the sand. He suddenly opened his arms and shouted at the sky with the loudest voice he could muster, "I will go. Above the 9 heavens, I will definitely go." The sandstorm gradually subsided. Li Qingshan found the stone pillar. It had almost been submerged by the sand. The words and diagrams on it had all been worn away by the sandstorm. Below the stone pillar, there was nothing. There seems to be something here. Li Qingshan had a puzzled look. He reached out and touched the stone pillar. The stone pillar shattered silently. It turned into dust that was finer than sand and drifted away with the wind like smoke. Li Qingshan stood on the sand dune for a long time. He looked around. There was only a sea of sand and he was alone. He felt a slight pain in his heart. His eyes were a little moist. He shook his head hard and looked at the mirage in the sky. He still remembered. "I have to go there to find the Sea Serpent King." With an inexplicable reluctance, he continued to move forward. He always wanted to look back, but he hated looking back the most. He gritted his teeth and strode forward. Soon, the sand dune was left behind, and it was no different from the thousands of other sand dunes. The wind blew gently. Li Qingshan's face was gloomy. He kept moving forward toward the mirage. The scenery on the road became more and more monotonous. There were no ancient ruins or ancient poplars. There were only sand dunes, like waves on the sea of sand. The sandstorm became denser and denser. He could only give up on flying and walk on the sea of sand. After walking for who knew how many days, or how many years, the sun always hung high above his head. It shone down scorching light, making him feel anxious. Even with the divine earth power, he felt tired. A layer of dust fell on his body. But he couldn't stop. The mirage was still there, getting closer and closer. Finally, after another sandstorm, Li Qingshan looked around. There was only an endless sea of sand. He stared at the sky. There should be something there. Chapter 8:26. Li Qingshan pondered for a while, but he was at a loss. Why was he in the center of this desert? His heart moved, and he looked inside his spirit and sea of consciousness, but there was nothing there, as if something was missing. The spirit that he had just raised relaxed again. However, he could not stay here. An indescribable great fear filled his heart, urging him to move forward quickly. He randomly chose a direction and staggered forward. There was no goal, no companion, not even an enemy. There was only the sandstorm coming one after another, and an indescribable great emptiness filled his heart. It kept expanding until it was the same as the whole desert, the whole heaven and earth. His face was sharpened until it was rough and blank. He could only keep moving forward, not daring to stop even a step, as if he would immediately be swallowed by this desert if he stopped. However, the exhaustion grew deeper and deeper. The earth no longer gave him endless support, but instead drew out his strength and spirit bit by bit. The desert was no longer golden, and the sky was no longer blue, as if the colors had been blown away by the sandstorm again and again. Finally, after a sandstorm, the sun also disappeared, leaving only the empty white sky and the endless stretch of pale white sea of sand. The sandstorm then subsided, and the sound of the wind also disappeared. Between heaven and earth, only he was still trudging with difficulty, listening to his own heavy breathing, stubbornly refusing to look back. He could not see that with every step he took, the footprints would immediately disappear, as if they had never existed. Time became blurry, and suddenly, the last of his willpower, like that stone pillar, collapsed with a loud bang. Finally, he collapsed on the desert. Perhaps this place could no longer be called a desert. There were no undulating sand dunes, only a boundless whiteness. His black eyes were blurry like frosted glass, looking at the distant blurry horizon. The white sand surged, drowning him inch by inch. Under the pitch-black sky, the continuous mountain range was like a crouching giant beast, quietly waiting for the dawn. Under a small hill shaped like a crouching bull, there was a small village. "Xiao heir, wake up!" A voice broke the silence of the entire world. A middle-aged peasant woman bent her back like a bucket and shouted. In a pile of hay in the cowshed, a skinny young man suddenly woke up from his sleep and thought blankly, "Who am I?" He looked around the dirty cowshed and felt the itch from the mosquito bites. Although it was a little uncomfortable, it was all so familiar and intimate. He gradually woke up from his dream, but that dream was so real that it felt surreal, as if everything in front of him was fakes. However, when he recalled the dream, it quickly dissipated like a puff of smoke. He only vaguely remembered that it was an extremely terrifying nightmare that almost frightened him. He felt that he couldn't wake up, so he gave up thinking about it. Where else? Of course it's in our house. Waiter, don't sleep in the cowshed when the weather gets cold. Don't catch a cold. Dinner is ready, go eat. The middle-aged woman laughed. Her voice was rough, but it was filled with deep concern, causing the youth to feel warmth in his heart. "All right, I'm the heir. This is Crouching Ox Village. My parents are both farmers in Crouching Ox Village, but they passed away when I was young. It's all thanks to my elder brother and sister-in-law who took care of me." He stood up, and he immediately became taller than the sister-in-law. The sister-in-law sighed, "Sigh, the days sure pass quickly. In the blink of an eye, you're already as tall as your elder brother. In another 2 years, you'll be able to marry and have children. You need to prepare now. When your elder brother comes back from selling the cow, he'll tear down this cowshed and build a new house for you. I can't say it's better than anyone else, but it can't be worse than anyone else. With your talent, Xiao heir, apart from caretaker Lu and village head Li's son, we won't accept anyone else in the village. Aya, the water's boiling. Hurry up and wash your face. Come eat." The sister-in-law rambled on for a while before hurrying to the kitchen. However, he only heard one sentence. "When your elder brother comes back from selling the cow." Yes, this had been planned a long time ago. Because the old oxen that had accompanied him since he had grown up was almost too old to work, he planned on bringing it to town and selling it to the butcher for money to build a house for him. Back then, he was very reluctant, but there was nothing he could do. Farmers didn't all raise cows like this. However, when he recalled Oxen's moist eyes, his heart shuddered. He murmured, "No, no, this can't be right." He rushed out of the cowshed and left the sister-in-law's cries behind. He followed the road to town and ran wildly. The morning breeze blew past his face, carrying the refreshing scent of vegetation. It almost drowned out the mountain path. He ran like he was flying, leaving behind countless crystalline droplets of dew. However, he had not eaten after all, and the nightmare seemed to have consumed too much of his strength. He felt tired very soon, but an indescribable urge urged him on. Go, go, go. Find the cow. After turning a corner, a familiar figure appeared in front of him. It was a middle-aged farmer with a simple face. He stopped in a hurry and grabbed the farmer's shoulder. "Big brother, where's the cow? Waiter, come and pick me up. The cow has already been sold. Look, the money's here. It's a total of 11 taels of silver. It's enough for you to build a house and get married." Big brother Li patted the pouch on his shoulder and smiled honestly. "I can't sell the cow, I can't sell it. I don't want to build a house and get married." He was frantic, rambling incoherently. "I know you have feelings for the old cow. I'm the same, but this is its life. We can't just bury it underground." Big brother Li's face darkened and patted his shoulder. "Where's the cow?" He panicked inside and bellowed furiously. "It's already been killed. You'll be too late. Let's go home," said Big brother Li. "Killed? Killed? There was a rumble in his head as if something had shattered. Big brother Li dragged him home, returning to Crouching Ox Village unconsciously. The hard-working villagers had already woken up, all greeting him. Every single face was extremely familiar. Big Brother Lee also replied with a smile. He passed by a brick house. It was pitch black inside, and a statue of a god was enshrined on the altar. An old woman in brightly colored clothes was currently worshipping the statue. She was the witch of the village. All weddings, funerals, and sacrifices had to be done by her. She even knew divination and exorcism. She was extremely effective, possessing great prestige in the surrounding villages. Hearing the disturbance, she turned around and smiled benevolently. The voice in his head rang out again. He suddenly broke free from Big Brother Lee and rushed into the witch's house. He made his way around the altar and arrived at the back of the house. There was a verdant vegetable field here. He began digging desperately towards a location that seemed to be engraved in his soul. He felt like all the blood in his body was boiling. His hands dug through the moist soil. He was completely unaware of the rubble that had cut his fingers. Big Brother Lee's cry and the witch's questions seemed to come from extremely far away. In that moment, he felt like he was extremely close to reality. Chapter 8:28. The white sphere was buried in the black soil. It seemed like a human skull, but it was also. A human skull was much smaller. He dug his hands into the soil with trembling hands and dug it out. His body immediately stiffened. His boiling blood seemed to plummet. It was just a white rock. "Little heir, what's wrong? Don't scare me," Big Brother Lee said miserably. He grabbed the witch's hand again. "Has my younger brother been possessed? Save him. Little heir, is there something in my vegetable field?" The witch told Big Brother Lee to calm down first before rubbing his head and asking kindly. It was extremely familiar, yet also unfamiliar. I don't know." He grasped the white stone tightly, stood up dejectedly, his body swaying a little. Exhaustion, hunger, pain, in a split second, surged up like a tide, but it was not as deep and heavy as the disappointment in his heart, but he did not know what he was disappointed about. Hadn't he been like this for the past decade or so? What was he yearning for? He made his way out of the witch's house and covered his eyes with his hand. Sunlight shone resplendently between his fingers. The sun rose as usual, radiating with warm light. The mist that enveloped the small village gradually dispersed, and smoke rose up from the chimneys of the houses. This was an extremely ordinary morning that he had repeated thousands of times in his life. From today onwards, he would spend every day and night like this, but he experienced a nightmarish fear. He returned home in low spirits and sat down at the table. He ate breakfast, lunch, and dinner. He gripped the rock that resembled a child's skull the entire time. The sun set again, but tomorrow would rise again. Crouching Ox Village was far too small, and life was far too ordinary. Everything spread like the wind. Very soon, everyone found out that Li Erlang had gone mad. They all came to visit him, but they all sighed when they saw him, saying that he was just too deeply attached to the old ox. He was unable to endure the blow, which was why he had gone crazy. The moon hung high in the sky. He finally stood up from the table and made his way out, arriving beside an ancient well in the village. He sat down on the moss-covered rock and gazed into the well. The water in the well quietly reflected the bright moon and the thin face of a young man, which was filled with confusion. Just what is wrong with me? Is it just because of a dream like that? However, even though the dream had dissipated like smoke, the feeling in the dream still lingered. It was an intense passion, a struggle, a wild laugh, an indulgence, a true love, and a death feud. His expression was twisted, and his scarred hands gripped the white stone tightly. "Erlang, don't move. We can talk about it. A dead cow can't come back to life." Brother Lee's voice was trembling. He was afraid that Erlang was going to jump into the well, so he tried to persuade him. "Little brat, you've really gone mad. Your parents died early. I raised you up with all my effort, and this is how you treat me," sister-in-law Lee roared. As she spoke, she began to sob. "You're not going to live like this anymore," Mrs. Lee roared. The sound of dogs barking could be heard throughout the village. Every household lit up their lights and the villagers woke up from their sleep. In just a short while, they were all gathered around the well. Adults and children, men and women, were all trying to persuade him not to take things too hard. His gaze swept past the crowd, past the crouching ox hill, past the endless mountains. The two words, Qingshan, suddenly leapt into his head. Like a flash of inspiration, he lowered his head and murmured, "Qing, brother, where's the money from selling the cow?" After a long time, he suddenly raised his hand and asked, "Wait here, I'll go get it right now." Brother Li rushed out of the crowd and quickly brought over the pouch filled with money and gave it to him. He looked at a few pieces of silver in the pouch, which shone silver under the moonlight. He put the stone in his hand into the pouch and suddenly stood up. The crowd quieted down, and pairs of eyes just stared at him. He looked around, chose a direction, and walked out of the village. The crowd was stunned by his expression and didn't dare to stop him. They split into two sides and watched his figure disappear under the moonlight. Brother Li and sister-in-law Li wanted to go forward to stop him, but they suddenly stopped, and a strange expression appeared on their faces. At first, his footsteps were very heavy, and he didn't know where he was going. But gradually, his footsteps became lighter and lighter. Using the bright moonlight, he followed the path that was about to be submerged by weeds and strode forward. After walking for a whole night, he walked into the town. The sky was already bright. He stood in front of a butcher's shop. A huge cow's head, with a broken horn, was hanging on the meat rack. The cow's eyes were wide open and had already lost their usual luster. It was a blur. Flies flew around as if to add a few more boring footnotes to this mediocre animal's deaths. But he could clearly feel that the blurry eyes were staring at him with that familiar warm gaze. Suddenly, he felt his face moisten. It turned out that unknowingly, his face was already covered in tears. "Little brother, what kind of meat do you want to buy? I just killed a big cow yesterday, and there's still a lot of good meat left." The butcher's boss asked a little strangely. He pointed at the cow's head. After a while, the butcher's boss watched him leave with a strange gaze. He faced the morning light, and the sunlight gilded his tall figure with a layer of light. On his back was a huge cow's head. The cow's head was very heavy, and together with the white stone in the pouch, it weighed heavily on his body. And that dream didn't seem to be faintly discernible anymore. It became heavy and clear. Time flew by, and the stars changed. The young man became a man, and the man became an old man. He traveled through countless mountains and rivers, but the scene in his dream never appeared. However, he still refused to stop. He continued to search and search. Finally, one day, he arrived at the top of the mountain and stopped. His once tall body was already hunched over, and his clothes were tattered. Only the skull of the cow's head remained on his back. The white stone had become as smooth as bone after being rubbed, but it was even heavier than before. He turned around and gazed at the path he had come from. Just how many times had he had the chance to stop and enjoy peace and joy, instead of being like this, suffering all the hardships and having nothing left? He could not help but think that perhaps he should never have come out. Perhaps he had already gone mad several decades ago. As a result, he saw the crouching ox village again, and he saw his similarly aged self, surrounded by his children and grandchildren, enjoying his old age in peace. Did he regret it? He removed the yellowed cow's skull from his back with his old hands and slowly placed it on his face. He supported it with one hand as he took out the white stone that he had warmed with his body with the other. He stared at it for a very long time and suddenly began to laugh. His laughter became louder and louder, mixed with violent coughs. He coughed up mouthfuls of blood, dyeing his snow-white beard red. With a thump, his laughter came to a halt. He collapsed on his back and gazed at the boundless sky. He said, "Regret my ass." Chapter 829. Qingshan, Qingshan. An incomparably familiar voice called out anxiously, accompanied by a brisk clap. Li Qingshan slowly opened his eyes, waking up from his dream. He saw an ethereal and beautiful face. "Where am I? Who am I?" Then he immediately remembered. "I am Li Qingshan and this is clamorous." All kinds of memories flooded in. Li Qingshan's pupils contracted, and the confusion on his face turned into fury. He flipped and stood up, his right hand clenched into a fist and pushed against the ground. His left hand formed a claw and faced the dreamlike beauty dressed in colorful clothes across from him. All kinds of techniques were ready to be unleashed. Wonderful, truly wonderful. But the woman did not seem to notice. Her hands continued to clap, and she did not disguise the admiration in her heart. Clam King of Mirage Sea. Li Qingshan gritted his teeth and said, "Bastard, wonderful my ass. Come, let's have a showdown." He could not help but think back to a long, long time ago. The South Sea is truly spectacular. In the evening, Li Qingshan and Little and hurried from Savage Mountain to the shore of the South Sea. This place just happened to be a peninsula that jutted out of the land. Wind blew from behind them, and the sea was boundless with endless waves. The sun set in the west and dyed the sky red. The orange light spread from the horizon of the sea to the front along with the waves. The scenery was extremely beautiful. Little and frowned slightly and seemed to be in thought. She was not as calm as usual. "What is it? What are you thinking about?" Li Qingshan immediately noticed and rubbed her head, asking with a smile. "Nothing." Little and shook her head lightly. "What? Is there something you can't tell me? You've really grown up. Let's go, the Mirage Sea isn't far." Li Qingshan listened to the Banyan Tree King's instructions and did not dare to stay for too long. He took out the sea map and glanced at it. After confirming the direction, he continued on his way. "Qingshan, the Clam King of Mirage Sea might not be as simple as the Banyan Tree King said." Little and suddenly said, "Is that so? Let's walk and talk." Li Qingshan was slightly surprised. Along the way, Little and told Li Qingshan all the legends he knew about the Mirage Sea, including the most mainstream views of the South Sea cultivation community. At this moment, a thin layer of mist suddenly appeared on the horizon. Normally, Li Qingshan wouldn't have cared at all, but when he looked over, he found that the mist was changing as if it had a life of its own, vaguely revealing a strange and dazzling scene. That was the place marked on the map, the location of the Fantasy Sea. It looks like this Clam King of Mirage Sea didn't purposefully set up a trap to bait people. Otherwise, no one would have noticed it at all, Li Qingshan thought. Little and looked at Li Qingshan, waiting for him to make a decision. "I told you that the Clam King of Mirage Sea isn't that simple, but you don't have to worry too much. Fellow Taoist Tree King must have his reasons for not letting you tell me this. It's not to harm me, or else he wouldn't have gone through so much trouble. There must be a reason behind it," Li Qingshan said after some thought. "I'm sorry." Little and lowered her head. With her intelligence, how could she not understand this? Logically speaking, listening to the Banyan Tree King's orders would be the most beneficial, but she was unable to deceive him, so she could only apologize. "The only thing you did wrong was to say that." Li Qingshan lowered his head and said seriously. Little Anne's innocent expression was especially lovable. "Do you know your mistake now?" Li Qingshan smiled. "Yes." Little Anne nodded with a smile. "Don't do it again in the future. I'll use the spirit turtle to divine again." Right now, no matter what Li Qingshan did, he was used to using the spirit turtle to divine his fate first. He had already done it once when he came here, but the future seemed to be shrouded in mist, preventing him from obtaining an accurate result. Clearly, it was the influence of the Fantasy Sea, but fortunately, there were no signs of death. No matter how mysterious the Fantasy Sea was, if it was a fatal death trap, it was impossible for there to be no warning with the miraculous abilities of the spirit turtle. That was why he dared to come here without any worries. However, when he performed the divination again, the result made him slightly stunned. Although the future was still blurry, it clearly showed danger, and there was even a hint of killing intent. He could not help but feel bewildered. Just knowing a few more things has caused such an obvious change in my fate. Normally speaking, shouldn't the more I know, the more I can avoid danger? If I was tricked by a lie, it would be understandable. However, the series of legendary information regarding the Fantasy Sea is clearly closer to the truth than the beautiful future described by the Banyan Tree King. "How is it?" Little and asked hurriedly. "Nothing changed." Li Qingshan smiled. "Don't lie to me. I didn't even lie to you." Little and pouted. "All right, it seems to have become a lot more dangerous," Li Qingshan said. "Sigh, as expected." Little and could not help but sigh. This proved that she was indeed wrong. Compared to the bliss of ignorance, I would rather bear the danger of knowing. If you lie to me too, I will feel worse than death. Li Qingshan looked into Little An's eyes with a smile, and said very seriously. This was why Little An hesitated again, and finally made this choice, even though she knew it was wrong. Mutual trust was more important than life. Do you still want to go? Of course. When have I ever been afraid of danger? It's not like I'm going to die for sure. Didn't I make it through a situation where I barely survived? Besides, curmudgeon myriad poisons is a little more troublesome. Li Qingshan smiled and flew to the end of the sea, diving into the fantasy sea with Little An. In an instant, the scenery around them changed greatly. Tall buildings rose from the ground. The concrete buildings were clearly the modern city that existed in Li Qingshan's memory. Under the hazy sky, they stood in the center of the crossroads. Complicated signal lights constantly flashed, and people and vehicles moved back and forth. No wonder the scenery everyone sees in the fantasy sea is different. So this illusion can reflect the inner world, Li Qingshan sighed. This is where you've lived? Little An said in surprise. She could tell that this unfamiliar city had its own set of operating rules. Only two people knew about Li Qingshan possessing innate wisdom. One was Brother Ox, and the other was Little An. He had mentioned it to her when he was copying novels in the past. Of course, in this wondrous world of the 9 provinces, this was not some great, earth-shaking secret. How is it? Is it terrible? Li Qingshan smiled. A little, but you've thought about going back, right? Little An seemed to be in thought. I've definitely thought about it, but I've even made up my mind not to return to Crouching Ox Village, let alone this place. Let's go. Our destination should be there. Li Qingshan pointed into the distance. A building that did not fit in with the modern city stood there. It towered into the clouds, standing out from the crowd. This should be called the Clam. They walked along the street slowly and arrived below the building before long. An elegant plaque hung above the vermilion door. On it were the 2 words Clam. I've guessed correctly. Li Qingshan smiled. However, a sliver of worry appeared in Little An's eyes. Li Qingshan walked up and knocked on the door 3 times, loudly stating his intentions. He took out the card that the Banyan Tree King had written for him. The card suddenly moved and flew out of his hand. It spun and flew into the sky, burrowing into the hazy clouds. Li Qingshan looked up. The clam seemed like it was about to topple over. Before long, the vermilion door opened loudly, and a voice descended from the clouds. Since it's the Banyan Tree King's introduction, please come in. The voice was extremely pleasant, but it was neutral, making it difficult to tell whether it was male or female. Could it really be a woman? Li Qingshan thought. Although he wanted to fly up directly, he still stepped through the vermilion door. The vermilion door closed loudly again. However, the first floor of the Clam was not as antique as Li Qingshan had imagined it to be. Instead, it was a metallic room filled with sci-fi colors. A foul wind blew over, and a huge monster stood in the middle of the room. Its black body flickered with a metallic luster. Its body leaned forward with its feet on the ground, and it dragged a spiky tail behind it. It let out a deafening roar and revealed layers of sharp teeth as it lunged over. Why does this thing look so much like the alien queen? As expected of an illusory realm. Do I have to fight my way up layer by layer? Li Qingshan rubbed his chin and muttered to himself. He casually punched out, and the monster that looked like the alien queen was instantly smashed into pieces. Its body fluids landed on the walls and ground, and immediately a layer of white smoke rose, corroding deep pits. After so many years, I still remember the setting of the strong acidic blood. In the future, when I'm free, I can write another novel and strengthen the divine talisman of great creation, Li Qingshan said with great interest. Gotcha. A metallic cabin door opened above his head. As expected, this is the way to play. Li Qingshan gradually realized that the various scenes in the illusory realm originated from his thoughts. If he knew nothing about the legend of the Mirage Sea and purely believed in the Banyan Tree King's words, things might have gone very smoothly. It was precisely because he had the thought that this trip was not as simple as it seemed that there was such an obstacles. This way, the Banyan Tree King, lies, could be explained. In this world of the Mirage Sea, lies could also become truth. The survivors who escaped from the Mirage Sea had only managed to escape because they believed in a certain kind of lie. The mainstream view of the South Sea cultivation world might be the fatal factor. If you believed that the Clam King of Mirage Sea was using clam chi to hunt, then she really was hunting. Of course, all of this was just an assumption. It was not like looking into a mirror and seeing what was reflected. After all, the Mirage Sea was still controlled by the Clam King of Mirage Sea. She might really be hunting cultivators. Since this view had been recognized by the South Sea cultivation world for thousands of years, it might not be groundless. But now that things had developed to this point, he could only fight his way up layer by layer. Not only was Li Qingshan not afraid, but he was also very curious about what other monsters would appear. Li Qingshan flew up to the second floor. Little and was still standing there, and an idea flashed through his mind. Oh no! Chapter 8:31. Second floor, fifth floor, 10th floor. As Li Qingshan climbed up, he encountered all kinds of strange enemies. They were all from his imagination, and they were getting stronger and stronger. After reaching the 13th floor, he could no longer win easily, but he did not care. He unleashed his divine abilities and power, and the more he fought, the braver he became. He enjoyed it. Little and supported him from the side with a hint of deep worry in her eyes. I hope it's not like what I think. With a loud boom, the metal monster was blasted into pieces, and the door to the upper floor opened. Little and what floor is this? Li Qingshan panted, and the wounds on his body slowly healed. The enemies were getting stronger, and he was starting to feel tired. 99th floor. But if we calculate the height, the top floor should be above us, Little and said calmly. Is that so? I was just getting excited. Is this game called Go Up 100 Floors If You're a Man? Let's go. Li Qingshan laughed and flew up to the 100th floor of the Mirage. Long, colorful curtains hung down in the tranquil palace. Wind surged in from all directions through the open doors, and the curtains swayed in the wind. The various colors wove together, brushing past Li Qingshan's face. Then he caught a whiff of an obscure fragrance. The incense burners spat out curling smoke, but even the wind was unable to disperse it. It coiled around the palace like mist. Li Qingshan reminded Little and to be careful and walked cautiously to the center of the palace. Little and looked at his back and frowned slightly. The mirage went deep into the dark clouds. There was no height to calculate, and this was an illusion. Li Qingshan soon saw a figure dressed in colorful clothes. Her back was facing them, and she was drinking by herself. May I ask if you are the Clam King of Mirage Sea? Li Qingshan bowed and asked probingly. I am. Please take a seat, esteemed guests. I've waited for a long time. The Clam Monarch of Mirage Sea waved her sleeve and spoke without even looking back, and she didn't seem to be displeased by Li Qingshan calling her its fellow Taoist. Li Qingshan carefully circled around the Clam King of Mirage Sea. A dreamy and beautiful face appeared in front of him. He thought, it really is a woman. However, because he was in an illusion, he did not dare to confirm whether what he was seeing was real or fake, so he sat down in front of the Clam King of Mirage Sea. Little and stood next to him and observed the legendary Clam King of Mirage Sea. Before Li Qingshan could speak, the Clam King of Mirage Sea said, You said you need my help. Is it for myriad poison? She glanced at Little and half-intentionally. That's right. Only fellow Taoist can do this. Li Qingshan cupped his hands. Sure. The Clam King of Mirage Sea smiled and stood up. She made her way over to Li Qingshan and extended her hand towards his head. Li Qingshan raised his eyebrows. His entire body tensed up, and he clenched his fists tightly. He was like a ferocious tiger that was ready to strike. Little and suddenly pressed down on his shoulder. Li Qingshan was slightly surprised, but out of trust in her and the fact that the spirit turtle did not warn him, he sat still. The Clam King of Mirage Sea's hand reached into Li Qingshan's forehead extremely gently, as if she had reached into a pool of water. It created a colorful ripple, and then she pulled out a jade-like, dark green nascent soul. The nascent soul that looked like an infant had its eyes tightly shut and was in a deep sleep. It did not resist at all. Li Qingshan touched his unscathed forehead and could not help but be surprised. This was basically unbelievable. Something that even the banyan tree king found troublesome had been resolved so easily by her. Everyone has their own specialties. The clam king of Mirage Sea seemed to read Li Qingshan's thoughts and said with a smile. She sat down again and raised her cup towards him from afar. "Thank you, fellow." Li Qingshan was overjoyed inside. He also raised his cup, about to drink it all. Qingshan, however, little and pressed down on his shoulder again. Earlier she did not allow him to fight, but now she did not allow him to drink. Li Qingshan looked at Little An in surprise. Little An bowed towards the clam king of Mirage Sea. "Thank you for your hospitality, sir. We still have matters to attend to, so it's time for us to leave." "You still have to drink?" The clam king of Mirage Sea fiddled around with the myriad poison ancestor's nascent soul as her smile flickered. There will still be opportunities in the future, but we really do have urgent matters to attend to. Thank you, Fel. We'll be taking our leave first." Li Qingshan also sensed that something was amiss, so he stood up. At this moment, the spirit turtle actually gave off an intense warning, but before he could respond, he felt dizzy. Suddenly, he saw the incense cauldrons around him. There's poison in the smoke. But that should not be the case. Even the myriad poison ancestors' poison could not kill him, let alone some sleeping smoke. His body swayed, and he sat down again, sprawled on the mat, and slept soundly. "But it's fine if you don't drink it." The clam king of Mirage Sea tasted the alcohol slowly. Her face suddenly blurred as if it was separated by a thick layer of frosted glass. Even her voice became hazy, making it impossible to distinguish her gender or age. Only her eyes remained clear. Various colors swirled and rippled in them like a kaleidoscope, staring at Little An. "What are you trying to do?" Little An stood in front of Li Qingshan with his sword in hand, completely unaffected by the sleeping smoke. "You really are strange." "Hee, can't you guess what I'm trying to do? How can a place as dangerous as the Mirage Sea allow people to come and go freely?" Even he refused to believe that it would be that simple. He was constantly on guard, so it obviously could not be that simple. "It's said that I created this illusion to prey on cultivators." The clam king of Mirage Sea licked her lips. Is it because that's what he thinks? The thing that Little and worried about the most had finally happened. The reason why the myriad poison ancestors' soul nascence had been resolved so easily was because of the banyan tree king's month-long indoctrination, which convinced Li Qingshan that the clam king of Mirage Sea would help him. However, learning about the true face of the Mirage Sea and the ominous outcome of the divination made him raise his guard and develop hostility. After the battle on the 100 Floors, this hostility only grew. In the real world, this thought was nothing at all. Even parents, siblings, friends, and husband and wife would often develop hostility. It would be fine as long as it did not erupt. However, this was an illusion that reflected the human heart, and the clam king of Mirage Sea was far too powerful and strange. Haven't you heard of the saying that illusions arise from the heart? The clam king of Mirage Sea smiled. He doesn't treat you as an enemy. Little An was afraid of telling Li Qingshan his guess because he was afraid he would develop even greater hostility, which would make the trip even more dangerous. Otherwise, he would be dead already, the clam king of Mirage Sea said slowly. The cultivators who had died in the Mirage Sea had treated the clam king of Mirage Sea as an enemy precisely because they believed in the mainstream view. The outcome of a battle against a peak third heavenly tribulation demon king in an illusion obviously went without saying. "What do you want?" Little An knew that fighting was useless, so he just stowed his sword away and let Li Qingshan lie down with his head on her lap. Chapter 8:32. The clam king of Mirage Sea poked the myriad poison ancestor's soul nascence with the tip of her finger. This enemy that Li Qingshan found troublesome was currently sleeping, as delicate as a real infant. In this world of the Mirage Sea, the clam king was the absolute ruler. Whether it was the poisonous alcohol or the bewildering smoke, they were just mediums. What truly took effect was still the Clam King of Mirage Sea's unbelievable power. No matter how cautious Li Qingshan was, she could pull him into a dream with just a blink of an eye. "I'm willing to dream this dream for him," Little Anne said to the Clam King of Mirage Sea as she cradled Li Qingshan's head. "No matter how close you are, there are some things that cannot be replaced. Originally, I wanted to give you a dream too, but unfortunately, your heart is empty. Nothing can be reflected, let alone a nightmare." "A nightmare?" Little Anne said. "Oh my, I think I've let the cat out of the bag." The Clam King of Mirage Sea stuck out her tongue and covered her mouth as she giggled. Just now, her composed, elegant, and noble image had suddenly collapsed. She was like a child who had succeeded in a prank, but her face remained a blur the entire time as if it constantly flowed and changed among the faces. Little Anne understood that this image of hers, even the way she spoke and did things, originated from Li Qingshan's imagination to a large extent. Only now that Li Qingshan had fallen asleep did she gradually reveal her true face. Regular people could not see this true face, as when people interacted with others, it was inevitable for them to have some preconceived notions and some illusions. The Clam King of Mirage Sea's existence itself would be distorted and affected, just like how everyone saw a different Mirage Sea. The Clam King of Mirage Sea had 1,000 faces too. Only Little Anne practiced the path of white bone and great beauty, being colorless and without self, without sense and without form. The Clam King of Mirage Sea's image was unable to receive the support of impressions and imagination, which was why she presented this true face that had no fixed face. They sighed in their hearts, "What a strange existence." "All right, the dream has been formed. Come, let us take a look. Let's have a drink." The Clam King of Mirage Sea smiled and pointed at Li Qingshan's head from afar. Li Qingshan's head shone brightly, and the roof above him suddenly turned into a colorless and transparent gas. Under the illumination of the light, it shone with a myriad of colors and gradually condensed into a picture hanging in the sky. Boundless yellow sand spread out. Poplar trees, ancient cities, ruins, and broken walls formed a desolate scene. Li Qingshan stood on a sand dune. "This is the fantasy sea." Beside him, Little Anne replied, "It should be an illusion. This nightmare seems to be very special." Clam King of Mirage Sea watched the scene with great interest. "This is?" Little Anne looked up. This nightmare did not seem dangerous at all. The Clam King of Mirage Sea countered with a question. "Do you know what is the most primitive, deepest, most enduring and most powerful emotion in a person's heart?" Naturally, this was not Little Anne's answer. Instead, it was a young girl who jumped out of the Clam King of Mirage Sea's body. She cupped her hands and had an expression of yearning. Blazing but not lasting. The Clam King of Mirage Sea shook her head. The young girl paled. "Friendship." A forthright man with an unkempt beard jumped out of the Clam King of Mirage Sea's body. The White Emperor still holds his sword when he knows. The Clam King of Mirage Sea waved her hand in disdain. The man was silent. "Kinship," a white-haired old granny said with a benevolent expression. "Loving mothers are common, but filial sons are hard to find." The Clam King of Mirage Sea sighed. The old granny silently shed tears. "Hatred," the twisted young man said darkly. "Fabricated things." Thus, the wise man stroked his long beard. "Nonsense." Figures jumped out one after another and gave different answers. They were all rejected by the Clam King of Mirage Sea and silently retreated. They talked to themselves, directed and acted like they were crazy. "Dreams," Little Anne suddenly said. The Clam King of Mirage Sea paused slightly and smiled. "Interesting, but it's still not right. Although everyone dreams, they are as fragile as bubbles, and they are just a beautification of desire. This complicated desire is not even worth mentioning compared to the true and only answer." Little Anne said nothing. "It's fear." The Clam King of Mirage Sea's voice trembled. She spread her arms and roared at the sky. Then she hugged her shoulders and knelt on the ground. The figures around her all showed expressions of fear and disappeared. The fear of not being able to obtain, the fear of losing, the fear of life, the fear of death. The fear of advancing bravely is because of fear, the fear of hesitating is because of fear, the fear of shouting is because of fear, the fear of silence is because of fear. All living beings have fear in their hearts. Behind every action is fear. Failure will lead to greater fear, and success will lead to new fear. Fear, fear, fear. The Clam King of Mirage Sea's voice gradually weakened. She curled up on the ground and sobbed softly like a frightened child. So scary. So what? Little Ann said. The Clam King of Mirage Sea leaped up. It was as if her performance earlier was just a dream. She pointed at the reflection in the sky and said, "This is no ordinary nightmare. It's the deepest part of his heart. It's the greatest and deepest fear that's stripped away of all those false desires and dreams. Do you really think he can survive?" Little Ann's expression changed. "Look, even you have fear. I understand now. There's no need to pull you into a dream at all. That would be too unreal. All I need to do is let you watch the thing you fear the most happen with a clear mind." The Clam King of Mirage Sea wretchedly rubbed her hands together and spoke in a mysterious tone. "HM? What is this?" The Clam King of Mirage Sea was slightly shocked and looked at the sky. At this moment, the first sandstorm in the reflection came. Oxen's whistle came from the dream and echoed throughout the entire Mirage Sea world. What kind of dream is this? Is he scared to death of this bull? The Clam King of Mirage Sea was confused. While she could create dreams, she could not decipher every detail. She hurriedly tried to maintain the dream. Very soon, Oxen disappeared into the sandstorm. Li Qingshan found the stone pillar, but he could not find any trace of Little Ann. It looks like that bull is not afraid, but a powerful symbol. To him, an unusual miracle almost burst the dream. But isn't this fantasy a little too surreal? The Clam King of Mirage Sea sighed. She felt that it was slightly strange for her to say this. After all, he had seen the most bizarre and dazzling dream illusions. Even the modern city Li Qingshan had imagined only slightly surprised him. Look, the real show is coming. Now that he's lost you, he can only move forward alone in the desert. His fear is growing deeper and deeper. The Clam King of Mirage Sea lay down comfortably and enjoyed the dream as she munched on sunflower seeds. Suddenly, she asked Little Ann, "Do you want some?" Little Ann ignored her and looked up at Li Qingshan passing through the sandstorms. The confusion on his face grew heavier and heavier. He felt a slight pain in his heart formed from magic powers. This kid's fear is really unusual. Normal people would only see some terrifying monsters or enemies that have come back from the dead. It's worth mentioning that I've appeared many times. However, this kid's desire on the surface is to fight monsters and climb buildings. He's basically a battle maniac. In other words, he's not afraid of fighting me? How daring! But it's still the same. Fear is the most primitive and deepest emotion in a person's heart. There is no exception, so accept your fate. Why don't we make a bet on how he'll die? The Clam King of Mirage Sea took out another bucket of popcorn as if she was watching a novel movie with great interest. Little Ann drew his sword and said, "Wake him up immediately and let us go, or I'll kill you." "Kill me?" The Clam King of Mirage Sea pointed at her own nose, and her ever-changing face suddenly froze. It was the overlapping of thousands of faces, all filled with disbelief. "Do you know who I am? I'm the Mirage. See, hi, King. Wah, cough, 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 cough." The Clam King of Mirage Sea's voice shook up the space. She let out a wild laugh before coughing violently. She choked on the popcorn. "I don't have the slightest hostility towards you," said Little Ann. The Clam King of Mirage Sea leaned on her hand and was troubled. "That really is a problem." "Yep, then I'll let you chop to your heart's content." Xiao An slashed down with her sword. The Clam King of Mirage Sea brought her palms together and caught the edge of the sword. "Your sword is a little strange. I feel like I can't let you hit me." In the Mirage Sea world, with the Clam King of Mirage Sea's strength, even if the myriad poison ancestors struck out at full strength when he was in peak condition, he would not be able to harm a single hair on the Clam King of Mirage Sea. She would already be lucky enough to escape from the Mirage Sea. However, The Buddha-slaying sword was not a regular arcane treasure. It possessed a unique power, which even made the Clam King of Mirage Sea feel a hint of danger. Little and tried to pull the Buddha-slaying sword, but it did not budge. The pale white samadhi flames of white bone lit up in his eyes, and the skull prayer beads slipped into his hand. Give up. If you had undergone the third heavenly tribulation, I would also be fearful, but right now, you're nowhere close to being my opponent. If this continues, your empty heart will develop true hostility or even killing intent for him. By then, you'll be in danger too. I don't want to kill you. The Clam King of Mirage Sea said sternly, like a warning, but also like a persuasion. The color in her eyes changed, unleashing the bearing of a supreme demon king. She was even more powerful than Li Qingshan imagined her to be. However, Little and ignored her. Release him. Look, he's going to die. He's going to die. Back. Don't miss the most fascinating part. The Clam King of Mirage Sea pointed at the reflection in the sky and called out like she was having a seizure. Little and suddenly turned around. Li Qingshan had collapsed in the white desert and was gradually buried by the white sand. At the same time, his aura became extremely weak. He was not injured at all, but he was on the verge of death. Little and lunged over and shook him hard, shouting, "Qingshan, wake up. It's just a dream." The reflection in the dream completely faded into darkness. It's over. It's an extremely wonderful dream, one that makes one gasp in amazement. It makes one feel that those who dream of monsters and enemies in their nightmares are basically weak cowards. This is a nightmare that is truly worth watching, but it proves to us once again that even such brave and fearless people actually have great fear hidden in their hearts, and fear can kill. The Clam King of Mirage Sea stood up and introduced the dream to the non-existent audience. She first praised, then sighed, and finally responded with a smile. Yet at this moment, the reflection in the dream lit up again, and the Clam King of Mirage Sea suddenly turned around. Why isn't it over yet? Was that not his greatest fear just now? When Li Qingshan woke up from the cow sheet in the dream, the Clam King of Mirage Sea was dumbfounded. Her mouth fell open without a care for her image, and the melon seeds in her hands scattered all over the ground. Chapter 8:33. Qingshan. Little and saw Li Qingshan furrow his brows in his sleep, as if he was in great pain. The Clam King of Mirage Sea sat down again. She was no longer careless. Instead, she sat upright and still, gazing at the dreamy reflection in the sky. Li Qingshan paced back and forth in his dream. The scenery in his dream was nothing more than an ordinary village the entire time, but he showed a nightmarish fear. She asked Little N, "Where is this?" Crouching Ox Village, the place where he was born. Little N glanced at the Clam King of Mirage Sea. In other words, this is 20 years ago. Really is as I thought. So this is his greatest fear, his greatest fear. It's not pain and death, not forgetting everything and dying alone, but fear that this is all a dream. The Clam King of Mirage Sea's voice trembled slightly. Little and sensed her abnormality and said in thought, "Since you said that all living beings have fear in their hearts, then it's the same. What is your greatest and deepest fear, Clam King of Mirage Sea?" The Clam King of Mirage Sea sighed and did not answer him directly. "Right now, I really do want to wake him up, but this goes against the principles of my existence, so he's dead for sure." In the past several millennia, the cultivators who accidentally entered the Mirage Sea and then sank into their nightmares might not even be able to face their greatest fear before they were killed by the monsters in their nightmares. However, through his extraordinary courage that did not fear death, he managed to last until now, entering an even deeper nightmare. However, he was forced to face his greatest fear. This was already an unsolvable knot. No one could defeat their greatest fear. No one. The greater the courage, the deeper the fear. This was the most primitive, deepest, most enduring, and most powerful emotion. It had always been the cornerstone of willpower. "I don't believe it," Little and said stubbornly. "All right, then let's wait and see." The Clam King of Mirage Sea was no longer satisfied with watching from the sidelines. Instead, she threw herself directly into Li Qingshan's dream. As she gazed at the dejected Li Qingshan, she could not help but sigh inside. She even felt a hint of anticipation. In the reflection of the dream, Li Qingshan dug out a white stone from the witch's backyard and sat there for a whole night. Then he walked out of the room and came to the well. Is it finally over? Through the villager's eyes, the Clam King of Mirage Sea gazed at the dejected Li Qingshan by the moonlight well. She could not help but sigh. If it was an ordinary dream, committing suicide was indeed a way to escape. However, dying in this deepest nightmare was only a dead end. Even the soul would be destroyed and then be digested by the mirage. The legends of the South Sea's cultivation path were not completely false. However, Li Qingshan stood up and walked out of the village. The Clam King of Mirage Sea was stunned, and so were all the villagers. Brother Li and sister-in-law Li wanted to go up and stop him, but the Clam King of Mirage Sea stopped them. She did not want to cause any more trouble. She wanted to see just what this man wanted to do. Moreover, when this man decided to leave, how could a village man and woman stop him? When Li Qingshan stood in front of the butcher's shop in town and stared at the ox head in a daze, the Clam King of Mirage Sea looked through the butcher's eyes and saw this. You still refuse to give up and want to confirm it? This oxen really does mean a lot to you. It's basically a pillar of support that you can't live without, but you can see now. Miracles don't exist. Dreams don't exist either. You should give up now. Go back to your crouching ox village. However, Li Qingshan shouldered the ox head and made his way off into the distance. The Clam King of Mirage Sea gazed at his receding figure and revealed a strange expression. What do you want? You still don't know, but all struggles are futile. As a result, she followed him, watching as he paced about in this exitless maze in search of a dream that did not exist at all. He was disappointed time and time again, but he never felt despair. He was tempted time and time again, but he never stopped. Unknowingly, she accompanied him through several decades of this dream. Finally, one day, he stopped and looked back. The shadow of death filled the air. He could clearly sense it too. After a moment of thought, he laughed aloud and uttered his final words. Regret my ass. It was earth-shattering, leaving the Clam King of Mirage Sea stunned. She murmured to herself, he actually defeated this nightmare. No, it's not exactly a victory, nor is there a possibility of victory. He just persisted the entire time without admitting defeat, even to the very last moment of his life. What an extremely stupid method. Vaguely, she seemed to see an indomitable oxen. The ox demon's great strength sinks in the mud. Perhaps life was a meaningless persistence, but persistence itself was the greatest meaninglessness. Perhaps there was no brother ox, no little and no 9 heavens in this world, but even if he had forgotten some things and lost the various divine abilities of the 9 transformations of demons and gods, there was a spirit that had been deeply engraved in a place even deeper than fear. Perhaps he would never be able to defeat fear, but this would not stop him from continuing to fight. Moo! The dream shattered. Butterflies flew through the boundless darkness, dancing with indescribable colors. They flowed with equally indescribable colors and dyed the black curtain. Following little Anne's call, Li Qingshan woke up from his dream. He slowly opened his eyes and gazed at little Anne's joyful face. The floodgates of his memories were instantly opened, and all kinds of languages, voices, and images surged out. His head felt like it was splitting, and he was extremely exhausted, but he also felt an indescribable joy. Wonderful! This is truly wonderful. The Clam King of Mirage Sea clapped hard and did not hesitate to express the admiration in her heart. As Li Qingshan woke up, her appearance stabilized once more. It was a dreamy and beautiful face. Clam King of Mirage Sea! Li Qingshan roared. He immediately understood that the nightmares he had experienced were all because of the Clam King of Mirage Sea. She was not as kind and gentle as the Banyan Tree King had described her to be. He was even more furious that she had treated his nightmares like a movie. I know you're very angry, but you can't blame me for this. Fellow little, and you'd better explain to him and have him control his hostility. Otherwise, I won't be able to stop myself from attacking. The Clam King of Mirage Sea spread her hands and wore an innocent expression that was asking for a beating. Qingshan. Little and hugged Li Qingshan tightly from behind and murmured. Little and Li Qingshan was slightly surprised. He could sense that her emotions were fluctuating violently. Chapter 8:34. A while later, Little and explained the entire story to Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan could not help but find it unbelievable. In his opinion, every single demon king was an extremely powerful and independent individual. They all had their own distinct personalities and opinions. It was far too strange for the Clam King of Mirage Sea to display different attitudes and stances based on the other party's will. He could not help but reevaluate the Clam King of Mirage Sea before him. Just what kind of existence was she? His initial guess that she was trapped by love was basically a joke. Then why did she spend her entire life wandering the South Sea? It's all my... Little and was about to apologize when Li Qingshan interrupted him. What? Nothing. Little and lowered his head. That's more like it. It feels like many years have passed, but don't think I don't remember what I said. Li Qingshan smiled. However, this also explained why the Banyan Tree King did not tell him the truth. Once he learnt the Clam King of Mirage Sea was a monster like this, it would be impossible for him not to raise his guard. It would be very difficult for him to deal with the myriad poison ancestors' soul nascence smoothly. However, there were still many twists and turns in the end, and it was still not over yet, as even a blind person could sense his deep hostility, let alone the Clam King of Mirage Sea who could read minds. Who knew what kind of changes would occur, but he had never been afraid of a challenge. He said to the Clam King of Mirage Sea, in other words, I asked for all of this myself. It's not your fault at all. You can't blame the mirror if you're ugly, right? The Clam King of Mirage Sea smiled like a flower. Then now that everything has happened, can you let us go? Li Qingshan composed himself and controlled his battle intent. The Clam King of Mirage Sea said firmly, Really? Li Qingshan squinted his eyes. As it seemed, there was no way they could be amicable this time, but how was he supposed to defeat the Clam King of Mirage Sea? Don't worry. I don't plan on bullying you anymore. The Clam King of Mirage Sea waved her hand with a smile. Bullying? Li Qingshan frowned. He had clearly been forced into dire straits, enduring unprecedented suffering, yet it was actually just bullying? It was really unpleasant. Although it's called bullying, it's actually very beneficial to you. Although you have a kind of courage to advance bravely, in the end, you are still too young. Without tempering your mind, your cultivation speed will become slower and slower, and it's very easy for you to fall into a bottleneck. This dream allows you to face the fear in your heart. It can be considered as making up for your shortcomings. This is rarer than any miraculous elixir. Although it was a little dangerous, you should be thanking me for the result. The Clam King of Mirage Sea tilted her head and stared into Li Qingshan's eyes with a smile. This is really hard to be moved. Perhaps I should thank your 8 generations of ancestors. Li Qingshan looked inside his body. Although he was extremely tired, he was unprecedentedly clear, like a rusted sword that had been sharpened and became sharp. In his heart, he had to admit that the benefits that this dream brought him were truly indescribable. First of all, he gained a deeper comprehension of the Ox Demon transformation. Although he had forcefully pushed the Ox Demon transformation to the 5th layer, it was like a child playing around with a huge blade. He had never been able to use it freely, only able to purely use its great destructive power. Only in the battle against the myriad poison ancestor did he comprehend the use of the gravity of the earth. Now, with his brand new vitality, he only needed to consolidate it, and he would be able to unleash even greater power than the 5th layer of the Ox Demon. He could not help but sigh. So the 5th layer of the Ox Demon can be so powerful. I'll probably have to break through to the 3rd heavenly tribulation before I can unleash my full strength. By then, are there any demon kings in the world who can contend against me? The other benefit was that the spirit turtle had become even clearer and clearer, like the dust on a mirror had been brushed away. Its senses towards the obscure changes in the heavenly secrets and fate had become sharper. And, when it was applied to abilities, it naturally had even more subtle uses. The warning signs had already vanished. There did not seem to be any danger in the Mirage Sea anymore, but Li Qingshan still dared not be careless. The Clam King of Mirage Sea really could not be predicted using common sense. Doesn't that go against the principles of your existence? Littlin asked. Don't look at me like this. I have my own opinions too. I just don't use them very often. The Clam King of Mirage Sea stretched out her body and gazed at the sky. She said, I might still be a stranger to you, but I've already known you for many years in my dreams, Li Qingshan. In other words, should I call you an old friend? Li Qingshan sneered. He did not feel honored that someone was admiring his sorry state in his nightmares. Hee, that won't be necessary. However, I hope you know that I share the same fear as you, which is why I've been trapped in this Mirage Sea for several millennia. The Clam King of Mirage Sea extended her hands as if she was trying to demonstrate the length of several millennia. Didn't you create this place with clam chi? Li Qingshan asked in surprise. Aren't cocoons created by insects? The Clam King of Mirage Sea smiled and scolded, it's all that bastard's fault. I was just joking around with him, and he tricked me like this. The more she scolded, the angrier she became. She felt that just scolding was not enough to vent her anger. Suddenly, she jumped up, and a man in dragon robes suddenly appeared in her hands. She slapped him left and right. Is it so great to be an emperor? Is it so great to be an emperor? Li Qingshan looked at Little and communicated, is there something wrong with this Clam King of Mirage Sea's head? There was nothing more terrifying than a powerful crazy woman. No one could guess what she would do down there. After a while, the Clam King of Mirage Sea tossed the man aside and lay on the ground. She exhaled. Forget it. It's still my own problem. When she saw that she had calmed down, she suddenly went crazy again. She grabbed her hair and rolled around on the ground. But why? Layers of illusions appeared in all directions. They were vaguely thousands of pained faces wailing and moaning. They contained a terrifying power of destruction that made people's hearts palpitate. Clam King of Mirage Sea, Your Excellency, we want to go back. Li Qingshan took a step back. He was no longer angry at the Clam King of Mirage Sea. There was no point in fighting a crazy person. Also, this crazy person really did look a little scary. It was better to keep some distance. No. The Clam King of Mirage Sea suddenly turned around, and the thousands of faces roared together. The incomparably enormous pressure made Li Qingshan feel like he was looking at the Dragon King of the Sea again. He asked in return, what else do you want? The Clam King of Mirage Sea smiled. The sky returned to blue, and the sun shone brightly. It was as beautiful as a dream. As a reward for your spectacular performance, I've decided to give you a gift. I don't really want it, but all right. Li Qingshan had to admit that he was still rather curious. A streak of green light was tossed towards Li Qingshan. It was the myriad poison ancestors' slumbering soul nascence. Li Qingshan caught it carefully, and all he heard was the Clam King of Mirage Sea say, I've already completely suppressed his will. He won't put up any resistance even if you use him to forge an artifact. Li Qingshan thought of something and suddenly thought of a bold idea. If he used the third ability of the Tiger Demon, abetting the tiger, against the myriad poison ancestor's soul nascence, he wondered if he could turn him into a haunt. In the past, he would never have dared to consider something like that. The will of a great cultivator was far too powerful. If he was careless, he might even suffer a backlash. However, it was a heaven-sent opportunity right now. In the past, he had also turned a group of demon commanders into haunt, but the souls that had lost their bodies and demon cores were far too weak. They were not of much practical use at all, so he could not be bothered with them afterwards, handing them all to Little and to refine. However, soul nascence was different. It was the condensation of a great cultivator's cultivation. Even if their bodies were destroyed, it would not affect their strength too much. If he could turn it into a haunt, that would be equivalent to obtaining a great cultivator servant, and it would be absolutely loyal and would never betray him. It would be much more useful than a blood oath scroll or something like that. Then thank you for your gift, fellow. We're about to bid farewell. Li Qingshan did say that with some sincerity. Although he had gone through unprecedented danger during this trip, it was all worth it if he could obtain something like this. Stop right there. Who said this was my gift? Do you even have a brain? You clearly brought this yourself, so why would I be so petty as to give it to you as a gift? Are you looking down on me? Li Qingshan. The Clam King of Mirage Sea grabbed Li Qingshan's shoulder and bellowed fiercely. Say it. I'm in the wrong, all right? Li Qingshan wiped the spit off his face. For the first time in his life, he was completely unmoved by a great beauty. Although he had been scolded for no reason, he began to look forward to it. Just what kind of gift could make the mighty Clam King of Mirage Sea so serious? An arcane treasure? That was too tacky. He just felt like it should be something more precious. The Clam King of Mirage Sea suddenly stood on her tiptoes and wrapped her arms around Li Qingshan's neck. She whispered into his ear, "This world is a dream. Warm, fragrant, and fragrant." In that instant, Li Qingshan had to admit that he was slightly moved, but before he could feel it in detail, the Clam King of Mirage Sea had already left. She stared straight at him as if asking, "How is it?" Li Qingshan was stunned. He pointed at his ear and said in disbelief, "The gift you're talking about is what you said just now? This gift is too heavy, isn't it? But I believe that you can endure it." The Clam King of Mirage Sea sighed again. She could not bear to look at him anymore, afraid that he would be crushed by this gift. "You're such a big idiot to believe a crazy person like me." Li Qingshan raised his head and took a deep breath so that he would not explode. He lowered his head and clasped his hands together. "I'll accept this gift. Can we go now?" The Clam King of Mirage Sea suddenly reached out and grabbed Li Qingshan's heart. With his experience from last time, Li Qingshan did not dodge at all. The tip of her finger touched his chest and produced a rainbow-colored ripple. Afterwards, she reached in and pulled out an item. Of course, what she took out was not his heart, but Li Qingshan's divine talisman of great creation that had been sealed for a long time. "You're a disciple of the School of Novels, right?" The Clam King of Mirage Sea played with the divine talisman of great creation that flowed with colorful light. "What else do you have to say? If you want this thing, I'll give it to you, all right? I'm begging you, do a good deed and let us go." Li Qingshan could not stand this crazy person anymore. Chapter 8:35. Li Qingshan stilled. He suddenly understood what she meant when she said, "This world is a dream." He no longer cared if he would offend her. "I think you're crazy." When you're in the dream, who doesn't think you're crazy? Tell me, are you crazy? Clam King of Mirage Sea grabbed Li Qingshan's collar and shouted fiercely. Suddenly, she showed fear and looked around in panic. She raised a hand to cover her mouth and said to Li Qingshan in a low voice, "Say, is someone watching us right now? If my performance is too bad, will I be killed?" Li Qingshan subconsciously looked around and suddenly reacted. He pushed her away. "Fuck you, it's fine if you're crazy, but don't infect me. Tell me, what should I do?" Clam King of Mirage Sea roared and gripped the divine talisman of great creation in her hand. With a crack, cracks appeared and blood seeped into it. "I don't know." Li Qingshan shouted at her. "You think saying you don't know is enough? You idiot." Clam King of Mirage Sea's voice grew louder. "Stupid or smart, I follow the guidance of my heart. If I will wake up from this dream one day, why should I worry? If this is a dream I won't wake up from, then there's even less to worry about." Li Qingshan did not think he was an extremely smart person, so he did not think about things he could not understand. Idiots really live easier lives. Clam King of Mirage Sea was stunned for a moment and sighed with a bitter smile. "If you say another word, I'll beat you up." Li Qingshan was angry. "It's not like you can beat me." Clam King of Mirage Sea said disdainfully, "All right, I've said what I wanted to say. We can go now." Li Qingshan was helpless. "I've thought for thousands of years, but I still can't understand." Clam King of Mirage Sea looked at the sky in a daze and sighed as she closed her eyes. A long time later, she opened them again and said, "Forget it." She seemed to be relieved of a great burden. In an instant, the world shook. As far as Li Qingshan could see, the haze that shrouded the sky above the city dissipated. The high-rise buildings below collapsed, and the people screamed in fear. They were like headless flies bumping into each other. It was like a scene from a disaster movie. 100-story skyscraper collapsed. Many people stared blankly at the shadow enveloping them, forgetting to escape. However, the moment the building hit the ground, it silently burst into countless colorful bubbles of various sizes. Be it the reinforced concrete, the people, or the trees, they all turned into bubbles and danced in the air. In the blink of an eye, the city had completely disappeared, leaving only the tall mirage standing alone. Bubbles floated in all directions, filling the entire world and bursting at high altitudes. The illusion was collapsing. The blue sky twisted and rippled with colors. Li Qingshan suddenly realized that they were in a giant bubble. Outside the bubble, thunder could be heard in the distance. Li Qingshan was surprised. He exchanged glances with Xiao and, "Don't tell me this is..." "Last question, Li Qingshan." The Clam King of Mirage Sea's figure gradually turned illusory. She asked, "Now tell me, am I real?" "I don't know," Li Qingshan said honestly. He really could not understand the Clam King of Mirage Sea. The thunder grew closer and louder. It contained a terrifying aura that could crush and destroy everything. This was, without a doubt, the fourth heavenly tribulation. The thousands of years of thinking might have been nothing, but even if he could not obtain an answer, he could let go of the question. She had begun the tribulation. She would ascend to another world, or she would turn into dust in the tribulation lightning. This would be the time to bid farewell. "All right then. At least remember my name, just like how you remember Little and that cow. Although you treat me as a stranger, I will still treat you as an old friend," the Clam King of Mirage Sea pleaded. Her figure became even more illusory, just like the thousands of bubbles behind her. "I will." Li Qingshan's heart moved, and he nodded seriously. The Clam King of Mirage Sea tossed the divine talisman of great creation back to him. "Shinming Dai." The moment she said these 3 words, all the bubbles burst at the same time. Every burst seemed to repeat these 3 words, deeply imprinted in his heart. She smiled slightly and burst like a bubble. From among the colors, a butterfly that Li Qingshan had once seen in his dark dreams flew out. It danced in a riot of colors, circled around Li Qingshan once, and then flew into the sky. The colors of the thousands of broken bubbles all gathered on the butterfly's body, dragging a long rainbow behind it. It broke through the largest bubble called Mirage Sea. The illusion collapsed and disappeared, boom. Scorching lightning filled the entire world, but it was still unable to drown out the beautiful rainbow. Li Qingshan and Little and flew far away. All they saw was the butterfly dancing in the lightning, as light as a dream. It seemed extremely fragile, but whenever a bolt of tribulation lightning landed on her, it would produce a riot of colors, dyeing the tribulation lightning into a rainbow. The butterfly continued to fly upward, and the entire sky was dyed by her dreamy colors, as if she was constantly asking, "Am I real? Am I real?" Across the 9 provinces, many figures stopped what they were doing and gazed in the direction of the South Sea. Their expressions varied, either envy, contemplation, or vigilance. The Banyan Tree King pondered, "He's actually ascended. Has he finally resolved the mystery Kid Sea left behind for him? Fortunately, Qingshan and the others are fine. I originally thought it was my fate, but I never thought it would help him, or should I say, her first?" The King of Southern Yu pondered in thought. The Clam King of Mirage Sea was one of the strongest among the 72 demon kings in the past. She was trapped in the South Sea by the Xia Emperor's scheme, unable to ascend even after all this time. Now that she's finally undergoing the tribulation, it won't affect the overall situation much. The Master of the Sword Pavilion sighed. The 4th heavenly tribulation truly is powerful. Even from so far away, it can shake up my mind. I wonder when I'll be able to take that step? Quite a while later, when the final rumble of thunder faded away, the silver moon hung over the sea quietly. The rainbow sky remained in Li Qingshan's heart, gazing at it for a very long time. Who knew whether it was because of the might of the world or because of her? Perhaps it was both. She succeeded, little, and said calmly. Just when Li Qingshan was about to say something, a familiar voice rang out from beside him. She flew so high. Suddenly he looked over, only to see the Clam King of Mirage Sea, Shen Mengdai, covering her eyes with her hand as she gazed into the distant horizon. She acted like it had nothing to do with her. Even little N, who had always remained unfazed, was taken aback. Li Qingshan glanced at the sky before lowering his head to look at her. He said in surprise, "Aren't you? How stupid! The one who ascended was clearly a butterfly. I'm called the Clam King of Mirage Sea. Do you think the clam and the butterfly are the same thing?" Shen Mengdai said with a disdainful expression. "Why didn't you? We're living in a dream. Who knows what will happen after ascension? Although there are 6 paths of reincarnation, it might be a huge lie. What if that dreamer doesn't dream of the world outside the 9 provinces, and that place is just a dreamless void? Wouldn't I be dead for sure? How can I take such a risk?" Shen Mengdai explained seriously. Suddenly she frowned. "No, you can't say that. It's too disrespectful." She knelt down toward the sky and chanted piously, "O great master of dreams, I am your loyal servant. Please forgive my rudeness. You useless idiot, kill me if you have the guts." After saying this, she looked around cautiously. However, the sea breeze was calm and the moonlight was gentle. Nothing happened. Her lips curled into a smug smile. That smile gradually widened into hysterical laughter. She leaped up, waved her arms, and jumped and ran on the surface of the sea. "Haha, I'm the smartest. I'm the strongest. You're all idiots." Li Qingshan finally confirmed one thing. She really had gone mad. However, he was unsure whether what he saw right now was just an illusion she had left behind, or whether the butterfly that had flown away had always been a dream of hers. Regardless, she had indeed undergone the 4th heavenly tribulation, and she was no longer bound by the Mirage Sea. Just the thought of a super mad woman like her was terrifying. After going mad, Shen Mengdai arrived before Li Qingshan again. She walked over the waves, elegant and serene, as beautiful as a dream. It was impossible to imagine what she looked like when she went mad. She said, "I'm leaving." But Li Qingshan asked instinctively, but he regretted it as soon as he asked it. What did that have to do with him? "The Dragon Province. I still have a debt to settle." Shen Mengdai revealed a chilling, sunken smile. Afterwards, before Li Qingshan could say anything, she burst like a bubble and vanished. All that remained was her final words, echoing through the sea, under the moon, and in his heart. Chapter 8:36. The wind blew quietly, and the cloudless night sky was illuminated by the extraordinarily large silver moon. The distant stars formed a resplendent river of stars. Li Qingshan held the divine talisman of great creation and remained silent for a very long time. Everything he had experienced in the Mirage Sea was like a dream. He muttered to himself, "Shen Meng." Suddenly he smiled. Probably no one could imagine just what kind of upheaval this crazy woman, who had been trapped in the South Sea for several thousand years, would bring to the world after undergoing the 4th heavenly tribulation. From now on, the Dragon Province would be filled with trouble. Of course, even now, he was still extremely doubtful of what she had said. He felt like she had lost herself too deeply in the illusions, which was why she had become so crazy. She was like the authors who had been scared to death by their own horror novels in the news from his past life. However, it was exactly because of such strange existences that the 9 provinces were so interesting, making people yearn for them. Alright, I look forward to our reunion in the Dragon Province. However, when the time comes, I'll bully you viciously." He stowed the divine talisman of great creation away and smiled. He was very vengeful. With that, he looked around. The surroundings were calm, so he could not help but smile bitterly. This crazy woman had almost made him lose his mind. He just felt like she could appear at any time. "Qingshan, look. What's that?" Little and suddenly pointed to the south. Li Qingshan followed her finger and saw a protruding semicircle on the horizon. It should be an island. That seemed to be the only explanation given how far away it was. But it wasn't there earlier. Before Little and could finish, Li Qingshan noticed something strange as well. The island was clearly rapidly enlarging, approaching them at an unbelievable speed. The calm sea suddenly began to surge. Li Qingshan called out to Little Anne, and they immediately flew north. It definitely would not be easy to deal with something like that. Fortunately, although they had experienced great danger in the Mirage Sea, they were basically uninjured. They were currently flying at full speed, so they moved extremely quickly. However, when Li Qingshan looked back, he was shocked to find that the island was approaching at a speed that was clearly faster and larger. Just as Li Qingshan was wondering what kind of calamity he was about to get himself into, the island stopped at the place where the Sea King of Mirage Sea was undergoing its tribulation. So the target wasn't us, but that crazy woman. Li Qingshan heaved a sigh of relief. He flew for another distance and concealed his aura. Then he executed the mystic light illuminates all and zoomed in on the scene hundreds of kilometers away. So big! Li Qingshan let out a cry of surprise. That island was actually a giant whale that was tens of thousands of meters long. A light wave of its tail would stir up a tsunami, and a jet of water would shoot up into the sky, as if it wanted to wash away the bright moon in the sky. In the face of this inconceivably huge strange creature, he could not help but sigh as if he had seen a god. It's the Great Whale King, one of the 72 demon monarchs. According to the records, he swims in the deep sea and never comes to the coastal waters. Very few people have seen him. Legend has it that his whale song is very beneficial to the soul. I think it's similar to the chant of Devanaga performed by a monk king at the peak of the third heavenly tribulation, but it's definitely hard to hear. Little and introduced calmly. Just like the Clam King of Mirage Sea, this was a colossus of the South Sea. However, one swam in the deep sea, while the other was trapped in the Mirage Sea. As smart as she was, she did not expect we'll cross paths with them. All of a sudden, the deep and boundless whale song, together with the surging of the sea, flew over hundreds of miles of the sea and entered Li Qingshan's ears. He had heard countless songs before, including popular music and beautiful classical music. However, there was not a single sound that could compare to this boundless whale song. It was like the soul of the sea was singing, and even his mind trembled. The whale song came in waves, each higher than the last. Li Qingshan closed his eyes and listened, feeling the vastness of the sea. His tired mind gradually calmed down. Everything he had experienced in the Mirage Sea was like passing clouds. In the end, all that was left was this solemn and ethereal whale song that reverberated in his mind. After an unknown period of time, the whale song stopped. The Great Whale King seemed to glance at Li Qingshan through the profound light illuminates all. Its dark eyes seemed to freeze the entire deep sea, deep and serene. Then, it did not linger any longer, turning back and swimming towards the depths of the sea. An irrepressible desire suddenly rose in Li Qingshan's heart. He wanted to cast everything aside and follow him into the depths of the endless sea. He wanted to float along with the waves, roam the sea, and not have to fight or worry anymore. However, he returned to his senses very soon. Now was not the time. He still had a heavy responsibility. He had to continue forward until he reached the heavens and stood beside that figure. As a result, he watched the huge whale gradually shrink, finally disappearing from the surface of the sea. She's probably here to see Shen Meng die off. However, she doesn't know that crazy woman has already gone to the Dragon Province. Li Qingshan could hear the farewell in the whale song. There was even a hint of joy, for she had finally broken out of the Mirage Sea and emerged as a butterfly. She has always doubted her own existence. She wants me to remember her as proof, but she doesn't know that someone has always remembered her. Afterwards, Li Qingshan discovered that he had unknowingly mastered the arts of the boundless ocean. This cultivation method that he had once placed great importance on had been eliminated before he could even reach the 9th layer. Even if he comprehended it now, it did not seem to be of much use anymore. However, so what? What mattered was that he would never forget the whale song under the moon. He would let it resound in his heart until the day when he was relieved of the heavy responsibility on his body and would listen to its call. Until then, he would carry on fighting with fear and dreams. Under the glow of the setting sun, Li Qingshan and Little and saw the coastline. Afterwards, they continued towards Savage Mountain. Qingshan, Little and suddenly called out. "Yes, what is it?" Li Qingshan turned around and looked at her with a smile. "In your dreams, did you want to kiss me?" Little and stared straight at him with her clear eyes, as if she could see the bottom of his heart. "It's not like I haven't kissed you before." Li Qingshan's heart skipped a beat as he said unconcernedly. "Not your face, your mouth?" Little and was extremely skilled at observing his expressions. Even the slightest expression could not escape her eyes. In order to emphasize it, she even purposefully pointed at his lips. "Don't talk nonsense." "I didn't." Li Qingshan's eyes widened like a bull's. "You're blushing," Little said. She added in her heart, "and it's very red." "That's because of the light," Li Qingshan refuted. "But the side without the light is also red." "All right, let's not talk about these useless things. We have to hurry back." Li Qingshan sped up and flew away. He had always been known for his bravery, but now his back seemed to be in a rather sorry state. He heard Little N's bell-like laughter behind him. Chapter 837. Savage Mountain, the 8-Point Hall. Little N stood guard outside the hall quietly. Not only could he guarantee that he would not disturb Li Qingshan, but he could also assist him at any time. In the simple, barbaric hall, Li Qingshan's scarlet eyes widened, staring at the myriad poison ancestor's soul nascence. Malice rose up from his body, giving off a presence that could subdue everything. His eyes had even become as red as blood, shining with 2 demonic streaks of light. The slumbering soul nascence suddenly stirred, filled with pain and reluctance. Although its consciousness had been suppressed by Shen Mengdai, sinking into an unawakened dream, it still resisted instinctively. It was so proud that it refused to submit. Li Qingshan's expression became sterner and sterner. He raised his eyebrows and let out a deep roar, which echoed through the hall. The figure of the tiger demon vaguely appeared behind him, baring its fangs viciously. Little N was rather worried. A soul nascence was different from a soul. It possessed most of a great cultivator's power, and its cultivation was even higher than Li Qingshan's. Although he had the Clam King of Mirage Sea's assistance, this was still very dangerous. Turning it into a haunt definitely would not be that easy. However, high risk also meant high reward. Once he succeeded, he would be able to claim the myriad poison cult's foundation. That was a blessed land even better than Savage Mountain. Coupled with the protective formation, it was priceless. The myriad poison cult's resources would be a huge chunk too. It was impossible for the myriad poison ancestor to carry all of them on him, or once he entered secluded cultivation, the myriad poison cult would not be able to operate anymore. He would definitely set up a treasury in the cult. And there would be a large medicinal garden with who knew how many precious spiritual herbs. As long as he obtained the myriad poison ancestor's loyalty, he could devour all of the heritage of a large sect that had existed for several millennia. Apart from these external benefits, the myriad poison ancestor himself was the most important. A great cultivator could increase their strength drastically, which would make their plans in the south even smoother. At crucial moments, he could even order him to self-destruct, and even the fire-devouring king would be doomed. And great cultivators were usually skilled in alchemy and artifact forging, so the myriad poison ancestor could even refine poison and goo on top of that. All of these benefits combined made Li Qingshan choose to gamble. When the tiger's roar reached the valley, the 10 cave masters were summoned back. They pricked up their ears to listen, secretly guessing what he was doing. The myriad poison ancestor really is difficult to deal with. It's very likely for him to awaken in such an intense confrontation. If that happens, it'll be troublesome. Li Qingshan frowned. He was in his own territory, and it was unlikely for the myriad poison ancestor to barge into his sea of consciousness again if he made various preparations. However, once the myriad poison ancestor blew up his soul nascence, he would probably be heavily injured, and it was even possible for Savage Mountain to collapse, which would severely damage his foundation in the south. However, there was no turning back. He used his full strength, and the strange light invaded the myriad poison ancestor's soul nascence strand by strand with great difficulty. As time passed, the nascent soul struggled more and more violently. Just as it was about to succeed, the nascent soul suddenly opened its eyes and looked at Li Qingshan with incomparable hatred. Their eyes met. Li Qingshan thought to himself, "Not good." The thing he was most worried about had happened. The nascent soul's eyes suddenly became misty. The key to doing evil for the sake of the tiger was the pair of tiger eyes. Even though the slumbering enemy put up less of a resistance, they were unable to make eye contact. In this dangerous moment, it instead pushed the power of the innate ability to the limit. The surroundings twisted and changed, going from the pitch-black belly of the mountain to a gloomy forest. Miasma gathered in the air, such that even the scenery slightly further away became blurry. Why did I fall under a tree? No, I have to hurry back. It's far too dangerous here, a shaman young man said in a panic. A young shaman said in a panic. Although his face was smeared with paint, he seemed to resemble the myriad poison ancestor when he was young. When he tried to find a large tree to climb up, the wind began to rise in the forest. Why is there wind here? The young man gazed in the direction of the wind. The thick miasma that had not dispersed for millennia suddenly surged and dispersed, like subjects welcoming the arrival of their king. Two specks of scarlet light vaguely appeared. Whoa! There was a vicious tiger's roar, and the entire forest shook. The fierce wind became even more violent, completely dispersing the miasma and revealing a vicious tiger. Its fur was scarlet like fire, shining with glossy light in the darkness. It was covered in bright, black patterns, and the character "For King" was written on its forehead. The tiger saw the young man and walked over slowly. The young man wanted to flee, but he became feeble from fright. The tiger pounced at him gently and pressed him under its front paw, lowering its head and staring at him. A foul smell assaulted his face. The young man looked back in fright. The scarlet eyes were forever engraved in his soul. Li Qingshan jerked awake and looked at his hands. They had not turned into tiger claws. What was that all about earlier? Was I dreaming again? He dreamed that he had turned into a vicious tiger, roaming through the dense forests of the Mist Province before hunting. Li Qingshan discovered that the myriad poison ancestor's nascent soul had already been dyed by the strange light. It stared at Li Qingshan with its eyes wide open, but there was no resentment or hatred anymore. There was only obedience from the bottom of its heart. Was that the myriad poison ancestor's dream earlier? Looks like it was a terrifying nightmare too. He was alarmed by me and woke up from the dream, but then he was affected by the tiger demon's innate ability and pulled back into the dream. My consciousness entered his sea of consciousness with it, Li Qingshan guessed. In the end, he could not help but sigh. It's all because of that crazy woman in the end. He had personally witnessed the Clam King of Mirage seize power. Clearly, it was not that easy to break free from her nightmare, and the tiger demon's innate ability still seemed to have abilities that he had yet to uncover. He subconsciously rubbed his eyes. Apart from turning his soul into a haunt, would it be effective in deterring the enemy if he used it in regular battles? There was no need for the enemy to directly submit to him. All he needed to do was deter them. Even if it was for a split second, it could be the difference between life and death. This nightmare sure has brought me quite a lot of benefits. At this moment, the myriad poison ancestor's nascent soul suddenly let out a baby-like cry and flew high into the air. It shone with rings of green light, illuminating the entire hall. Li Qingshan gazed over. The myriad poison ancestor's nascent soul rapidly grew up, actually turning back into the myriad poison ancestor in the end. When the green light dispersed, it landed before Li Qingshan again and directly knelt down. It was filled with shame and regret. "Great King, please forgive this old man for his great disrespect." Seeing how his mortal enemy had become like this, Li Qingshan could not help but be taken aback. The corner of his lips curled into a smile, but he refused to believe it completely, afraid that it was a trap. As a result, he straightened himself out and coughed gently. "Old bastard, do you know your crimes?" I do. The myriad poison ancestor bowed his head repeatedly. "What crimes? Tell me." Some of the doubt in Li Qingshan's eyes vanished. Great cultivators had their own pride. It was basically impossible for them to do something like that. First, I shouldn't have launched a sneak attack on Savage Mountain while the Great King was away, much less resent the Great King over the deaths of my disciples. Afterwards, the Great King wanted to kill me, so I should have stood still and allowed the Great King to kill me. Then I tried to flee, which added to my crimes. I can't even bear it even if I die. I only hope the Great King can allow me to make up for my crimes with merit. With how wise and valiant the Great King is, you'll definitely unite the 9 provinces in the future. I'm willing to follow your lead." The myriad poison ancestor said a great deal of flattery again. Clearly, the myriad poison cult possessed a legacy like that, which even made Li Qingshan feel embarrassed. He barked, "Shut up." The myriad poison ancestor immediately shut up. He was extremely obedient. Li Qingshan could not help but laugh aloud. He had finally come to an end with this battle, and he had benefited greatly from it. His laughter echoed through the surroundings before gradually dying down, turning into a long sigh again. Seeing a powerful opponent who had fought him to the death reduced to such a state was an extremely delightful matter, but it also made him feel rather sorrowful. The path of cultivation was so cruel. Once he failed, he might end up begging for death. There was no point in taking revenge anymore. After confirming that the myriad poison ancestor had already submitted to the tiger demon's ability, he said, "You can rise." Li Qingshan then asked about the myriad poison ancestor's current state. The myriad poison ancestor truly was a knowledgeable great cultivator after all, immediately giving him an explanation. Throughout history, a few great cultivators would become ghost cultivators after their bodies were destroyed, unable to find a suitable body with their soul nascence. As a result, they would become ghost cultivators, and their strength would be equivalent to ghost kings. Of course, ghosts were not immortal. In particular, ghost cultivators in the world of the living might even have a shorter lifespan than when they were humans. Once their time was up, their souls would disperse if they did not return to the 6 paths of Sasra. "Then how much lifespan do you have left?" Li Qingshan asked in a hurry. He had managed to recruit the strongest lackey after so much difficulty, so he had better not kick the bucket in just a few years. "I've already cultivated for 957 years. Originally, I only had a few centuries left in my lifespan, but now that I've become a ghost cultivator, that might not necessarily be the case. If I continue doing things like before, my lifespan will decrease by over 100 years. If I cultivate in a land of extreme Een, my lifespan will increase by quite a lot, and if I have a method for ghost cultivators, my lifespan will increase even further. If I stay in the hungry ghost realm, I might even be able to live for another few thousand or even 10,000 years. A few centuries is enough." Li Qingshan waved his hand and took out the Sumeru ring he had stolen from the myriad poison ancestor with a flip of his hand. With a gentle flick of his thumb, it landed in the myriad poison ancestor's hand. Although Ru Exen had searched through it, she had mainly taken away the medicinal ingredients for the scripture on poison. She had not touched anything else, including the arcane treasure, the Jade Throne. If he returned it to the myriad poison ancestor now, his strength would not suffer too much. The myriad poison ancestor bowed in thanks and put the Sumeru ring back on his finger. "With that, how much of your strength will you be able to recover?" Li Qingshan asked. 60%. Only 60%? Li Qingshan was surprised. This was slightly more than he had imagined. Suddenly becoming a ghost cultivator requires some time to adapt. By then, it should be 70%. The cult treasure was destroyed, or I could increase it by another 10%. If I have a good method for ghost cultivators, I might be able to recover to 80% or even 90%. The myriad poison ancestor stood with his hands by his sides and said politely, like a loyal old butler, "A method for ghost cultivators. Li Qingshan sank into his thoughts. He only knew that the Umbral Een sect should possess powerful methods for ghost cultivators, but he was a disciple of the Chan monastery of Devanaga right now. Coupled with the fact that he was an elder of the Sword Collection Palace, he was basically an enemy of the Umbral Een sect. I just happen to know a decent method for ghost cultivators. It can recover his strength to 100% or even higher. Little An walked in from outside. Chapter 838. Little An, as well as the daughter of Chu Lai King and the Dark Queen, had high hopes placed on her since she was young. She cultivated diligently. The Umbral Een sect had many cultivation methods and secret manuals that regular disciples could not come into contact with, but she could read them freely. The Umbral Een sect possessed a scripture of the Ghost King, a secret that only the path of ghost cultivators would pass on. It was similar to the Diamond Sutra of the Chan monastery of Devanaga. Once the Diamond Sutra reached the third heavenly tribulation, it could turn into various Vajras according to the different paths, such as the Fearless Guardian King, the Unraging Guardian King, the Raging Guardian King, the Unmovable Guardian King, and so on. However, with the scripture of the Ghost King, after undergoing the third heavenly tribulation, it could become the Malevolent Eye Ghost King, the Blood-Devouring Ghost King, the Blight-Devouring Ghost King, the Soaring Ghost King, the Thousand-Eyed Ghost King, and so on. It was even more numerous than the former. No matter which path of cultivation a cultivator had taken when they were still alive, they could all find a corresponding path after becoming a ghost cultivator. Little An originally read through this cultivation method casually, but with how clever she was, she obviously had a photographic memory. She said to the myriad poison ancestor, "I'll pass this scripture of the Ghost King to you. With your cultivation, you can convert to the path of ghost cultivators very quickly and become a poison-assimilating Ghost King. Your methods with poison might even be better than before." "Thank you, sir." The myriad poison ancestor beamed. Although he had been subdued by Li Qingshan and turned into a haunt, he had not lost his intelligence. He still felt joy, anger, sorrow, and joy. "It won't make things difficult for you, right?" Li Qingshan asked Little An. To a large sect, a cultivation method like this was definitely a secret that they would not pass on. "Compared to where we're going, this is just an insignificant detail," said Little An. "Fair enough." Li Qingshan smiled. Looking down from above, what was the Umbral Een sect or even the 9 provinces worth? There were many things that were not taboo at all. If he could do it, he would do it. Li Qingshan's expression suddenly changed. He said to Little An, "The Tree King is calling me. Pass on the cultivation method to this old man." Then he said to the myriad poison ancestor, "From today onwards, see her like you see me." The myriad poison ancestor accepted the order politely. Li Qingshan arrived outside the belly of the mountain. The 10 cave masters bowed together and said loudly, "Greetings, Your Majesty." Li Qingshan swept his gaze across the surroundings. Although he did not deliberately reveal his aura, every single cave master felt a sense of pressure. He couldn't help but lower his head. Li Qingshan was considering when he should use them to test out the new ability derived from Accomplice to the Tiger. It would be great if he could intimidate a living person. It would be equivalent to a blood oath scroll that could be used infinitely, and it would not be that troublesome. The myriad poison ancestor has already yielded to me, choosing to join us. From today onwards, I have no more opponents in the south apart from Fire Melt Mountain. The 10 cave masters were stunned at the same time. If the myriad poison ancestor being slain by Li Qingshan was already the most unbelievable matter, then this news would be even more shocking. After Li Qingshan had basically destroyed the myriad poison cult, the myriad poison ancestor had actually yielded to him. That was basically a fantasy. "Your Majesty, please forgive Wufeng's rudeness. The myriad poison ancestor is full of tricks, so you have to be careful. Don't let him feign surrender," said Yu Wufeng. There was no blood oath scroll in the world that could restrain a great cultivator. The other cave masters said nothing, but they all felt like this was the final possibility. However, out of consideration for Li Qingshan's pride, they could not bring themselves to say anything. Since Yu Wufeng had started, they all chimed in. At the same time, They carefully observed Li Qingshan's expression. If the myriad poison ancestors suddenly rebelled, they would all lose their lives. If it were not for the ability of the tiger demon, accomplice to the tiger, Li Qingshan would have never believed in the myriad poison ancestors' loyalty. He did not explain too much right now either. You don't have to worry. I have my plans for this. Anyway, the myriad poison cult has fallen. Fire Melt Mountain will be next. Yes, Your Majesty. The cave masters dared not say anything else. Only the strong were worthy of respect. Yu Wufeng had no idea whether he should be happy for his sect in the distant South Sea or not. Their mortal enemy of several thousand years had actually been defeated just like that. However, the savage mountain that had risen up like a comet would probably be even more brutal. Li Qingshan arrived under the great banyan tree and sat down in a hidden tree hole. He told the banyan tree king everything that had happened in the Mirage Sea. However, he brushed over the many details of the nightmare in a vague manner. It was not that he did not trust the banyan tree king, but that was his deepest secret. After listening to Li Qingshan's story, the banyan tree king fell silent as if he was thinking about something. For a moment, there was only the rustling of the canopy in the wind. Quite a while later, Just Now sighed in amazement. Originally, I was worried that you would encounter danger in the Mirage Sea, but I didn't think it would be a blessing in disguise. Looks like I've wasted my efforts. I will never forget Senior's care and concern, said Li Qingshan. Even though there were many deceptions, the banyan tree king was doing it for his own good. No, this is your fortune, and it's what you deserve. That oxen, no, that Senior has a discerning eye. I believe that one day, you'll be able to reunite with him. In their many years of association, the banyan tree king had vaguely guessed the existence of oxen. However, he had always doubted Li Qingshan's ambitions. Only at his level did he understand just how distant that place was. However, after hearing about Li Qingshan's experiences in his dream, he felt that perhaps he really could reach that step. His persistence was not the kind of stubbornly stubborn persistence. Instead, it often gave people a feeling that it did not matter. It was as if even if he could not reach beyond the heavens, it was not a big deal. However, as long as he was still alive, he would continue. Even if he failed in the end, he could still smile calmly and say that he had no regrets. I hope so. Li Qingshan shrugged. But I'm very curious. Has the Clam King of Mirage Sea ascended? If she survived the fourth heavenly tribulation and did not ascend, wouldn't she be invincible? Didn't she already tell you? Shenmeng that what flew away was naturally her dream, said the banyan tree king with a smile. In other words, her true body is still in this world. Li Qingshan was surprised. For her, perhaps dreams are the real thing, said the banyan tree king. All right then. I'm just afraid that I won't be able to defeat her. Li Qingshan's resentment was very deep. You don't have to worry about that. The world of the 9 provinces has its own laws. Let alone an ascender, even visitors from a higher world will be restricted by these laws, or even suppressed by the entire world. Only those who have reached that senior's level can completely ignore them, said the banyan tree king. Though her power is far too wondrous. Even if she's only at the peak of the 3rd heavenly tribulation, she can still turn the dragon province upside down. Hopefully, that fellow fox can suppress her. The banyan tree king seemed to have a deep understanding of the Clam King of Mirage Sea's madness. He expressed his worry for the future. Once she began messing around, the situation would probably deteriorate to a point where even his intelligence could no longer predict it. After a deep conversation with Li Qingshan, he said, since you've subdued the myriad poison ancestor, you can get him to talk to Ru Exin. After all, there are some things that everyone specializes in. I'm not omniscient. Really? What's she doing exactly? She's acting so mysterious. Sigh, you better wait for her to tell you herself. Chapter 839. In the gloomy dwelling, Li Qingshan carefully avoided the bottles and jars beneath his feet. A strange smell permeated the air, and it was a mess everywhere. It differed drastically from her usual neat and tidy style. Suddenly, a shrill cry rang out from the depths of the dwelling. Li Qingshan flew in and saw Ru Exin standing there in white. The cry had come from right in front of her. Li Qingshan patted her shoulder, and Ru Exin turned around, revealing an extremely vicious, green face, which frightened Li Qingshan. However, he immediately saw that it was just a bronze mask. "What are you doing?" Li Qingshan grumbled and looked in front of her. A fire devourer was firmly trapped on the stone pedestal. His belly had been cut open, revealing his organs. In particular, a bright red heart shone with red light. Ru Exin currently held a small bottle in her hand, pouring some unknown liquid onto the heart. The fire devourer's cries became even more intense. Several dozen crystal coffins stood in the surroundings of the dwelling, with several dozen fire devourers in them. There were men and women, young and old. Their eyes were firmly shut, and they were still breathing. Ru Exion's hand trembled, and she poured the liquid in the small bottle onto the fire devourer. In a single moment, the fire devourer stopped screaming, and a grayish-white layer enveloped him. "Why have you come?" Ru Exion's voice rang out from behind the bronze mask. It seemed rather chilling. "I've come to see what you're doing. What are you wearing this for?" Li Qingshan gazed at Ru Exin. He just felt like she was a little different from usual right now. "It's just a gas mask. I found it from the myriad poison ancestor. If you have nothing to do, then go play by yourself. Don't disturb me." Ru Exin waved her hand impatiently. "What's this supposed to be? A human experiment?" Li Qingshan knocked the fire devourer on the stone pedestal and discovered that his body was as tough as rock. Even his blood had congealed. He clicked his tongue. "What strange and violent toxicity. With your intelligence, it would be hard for you to understand even if I told you." Ru Exin spread her hands and shook her bronze head. "You can insult my character, but you can't insult my intelligence." Li Qingshan was enraged. It was one thing for the Mirage CCC monarch to call him an idiot, but he wouldn't stoop to the level of a lunatic. It wasn't easy for him to get home, but he was still going to be scolded. "Heh, too bad you don't have either." Li Qingshan simply ignored her and paced around the dwelling. He knocked on the crystal coffin and weighed the bottles and jars in his hand. He vaguely understood something and asked, "You want to poison Fire Melt Mountain?" "No, it's not poison, it's a disease or a virus," Ru Exion said. "What virus?" Li Qingshan asked. "It's a vicious plague that's highly contagious. There are currently two directions. One is to turn into stone like this. There's another type of body that keeps heating up until there's a bang sound." Ru Exin gestured with her hands. There was a hint of fervor in her voice, and her eyes shone with fiery light. Combined with her vicious bronze mask, she gave off a dark aura. "Are you all right?" Li Qingshan asked in concern. Although he wanted to breach Fire Melt Mountain and steal the divine Wudong tree, he wanted to take down Fire Melt Mountain and take the divine Wudong tree, but he did not want her to go crazy like Shen Mengdai. "I've never been better," Ru Exion said. "Then, can the fire-devouring kings contract this disease?" Li Qingshan asked. "Of course not. It can only infect fire devourers who have undergone the first heavenly tribulation at most. Then what's the point? It won't be able to harm the core force of Fire Melt Mountain at all. Don't tell me you're just going to wait for these powerful fire devourers to all die of old age?" "I can't wait that long," Li Qingshan said. "I said you're brainless, and you still won't admit it. Once I create this disease, I can sell it to the Crystal Palace, which is the royal court of the merfolk, in exchange for a great deal of benefits. What do you think the Crystal Palace will do after they get their hands on it? They'll definitely use it. They're mortal enemies after all. If this disease really is as powerful as you say, it'll be enough to sever the foundation of Fire Melt Mountain," Li Qingshan said. Although other folk all possessed great talent for cultivation, most of them had not undergone the first heavenly tribulation or undergone the first heavenly tribulation. It was impossible for them to not use a weapon of mass destruction like this after obtaining it. All they had to do was wait for Fire Melt Mountain to be destroyed. Do you think Fire Melt Mountain will just sit and wait for death? No, they can't think that far ahead. Anger and hatred will make them lose their rationality. Unlike the countless wars in the past, this will be a war of annihilation. Ru Exion smiled. The two races had been at war for many years. They had both won and lost, but no matter who won, as long as they returned to their own territory, the other party would struggle to pursue them due to the geography. The main peak of Fire Melt Mountain and the Crystal Palace had actually never been attacked. It was almost impossible for experts at the level of the Merfolk King and the Fire-Devouring King to die. Once they had the geography, it was very possible for them to turn the tables. As a result, the plan to borrow the power of the Merfolk of the South Sea to take down Fire Melt Mountain seemed simple, but it was actually nowhere near that simple. No matter how deep the grievances between the two races were, they would never take this risk. He would probably still have to take action, but it would be very easy for him to be used as cannon fodder by the Merfolk. Li Qingshan had worried about this before, but he believed in Little N's plan, so he had never looked into it too deeply. Only now did he find out that such a vicious scheme had actually been prepared right under his nose for a very long time. Perhaps it could also be described as an open scheme. As long as this virus did exist, it was impossible for the Merfolk of the South Sea to not use it. They would go to war the moment they used it. If this progressed smoothly, he did not even have to face the Fire-Devouring King. All he had to do was wait for the Fire Devourers and Merfolk to fight to the bitter end. There was basically no risk at all, and he could even benefit a lot from the Merfolk of the South Sea. He also understood why the Banyan Tree King would admit that his abilities were limited and get him to introduce the myriad poison ancestor to Ru Exin. He had always been the guide and protector of the demons and other folk of the Mist Province. Although the Fire Devourers never gave a damn about anyone, he did not want to carry out this vicious scheme. Even the person in charge of this matter, Li Qingshan, found this to be far too vicious. His main conflict with Fire Melt Mountain was still an irreconcilable conflict of interest. He wanted to see who was stronger. His hatred was concentrated on the Fire-Devouring King and the group of core experts of Fire Melt Mountain. Of course, he would not be soft-hearted and pursue some methods of justice. If a battle really broke out on Fire Melt Mountain, just the shockwaves of the battle could kill thousands of Fire Devourers. There was no need for him to pretend to be merciful. He was more worried about the woman in front of him. He could imagine that she had been waiting for this day ever since the day she joined the School of Medicine. The plan is very good, but don't be too hasty. If it really doesn't work out, there are still other ways. Being impatient is a great taboo for cultivation. Don't forget why your master gave you this name. I won't forgive anyone, Ru Exin said resolutely. Yeah. I don't really agree with your master's methods either. Treating and saving people is a very good thing, but how can you not get revenge when there's a grudge? Though, don't let hatred take over everything. We have to happily take revenge to our heart's content. Li Qingshan pressed down on her shoulder and gently removed the bronze mask from her face. Her jade-like face was clearly filled with unprecedented pain and weakness. She glanced past the crystal coffins in a daze as if she could not look straight at them. I don't know them at all. If that's the case, what's the difference between me and the people I hate? Healers were like parents. No matter how much hatred there was, no matter how vicious his tongue was normally, Hua Si still taught her a benevolent heart. Chapter 840. What a great demon! Ru Exin smiled. Then aren't you a great demoness? Don't we just happen to make a pair? Li Qingshan pursed his lips and gazed at her smiling face. He could not help but lower his head and kiss her slightly curved red lips. A vicious bronze mask blocked his way. He smiled and kissed the mask gently again. He felt her shoulder tremble. Emerging from the dwelling, Li Qingshan basically understood Ru Exin's intentions for coming to the south. However, he had no idea why she had developed such grievances with the Fire Devourers. It did not seem to be just because of the old grievances between the two races. And not only did she refuse to return to the South Sea, but she even schemed against the Merfolk. Clearly, she did not have a sense of belonging. This grievance was clearly so deep, yet in the beginning she had instead advised him not to become enemies with Fire Melt Mountain. She would rather take the risk herself than let him take part, which left him both touched and helpless. However, he still chose the path of becoming enemies with Fire Melt Mountain in the end, which meant they were still in the same boat. Her plan for revenge increased his chances of taking down Fire Melt Mountain. However, if he wanted to carry out the plan, he would have to wait until she underwent the second heavenly tribulation at the very least. Although he had the myriad poison ancestors' full assistance, going as far as to use the resources of the cult to refine viruses and increase her cultivation, it would probably take several years. To cultivators, this period of time was not long, nor was it short. It was worth it to deal with a colossal existence like Fire Melt Mountain. Li Qingshan obviously would not waste this precious period of time. He decided to enter secluded cultivation for a while so that he could consolidate his experiences in the Mirage Sea and Dream. As a result, he handed over some matters to the 10 cave masters and spent some time with Yi Liusu and her sister before returning to the hall. Before long, Little N arrived in the hall too. She had already passed on the scripture of the Ghost King to the myriad poison ancestor in its entirety, but it would obviously take quite a lot of time for him to truly become a ghost cultivator. As a result, she simply let him return to the myriad poison cult to cultivate. Once he had completely become a ghost cultivator, he would return and await orders. Everything that happened on Savage Mountain obviously had to be kept a secret. He had to continue acting as an enemy and serve as a hidden pawn. As a result, the war between Savage Mountain and the myriad poison cult suddenly began and ended, leading to all sorts of speculations in the outside world. However, the myriad poison ancestor was still alive after all, or it would have been impossible for him to hide from the heavenly secrets. Everyone thought he was in secluded cultivation, waiting for another opportunity for revenge. Even the king of Southern Yu never thought he would actually be defeated in an open battle and have his body destroyed, let alone become a servant. Naturally, they thought that Li Qingshan would not have an easy time in the southern border with such a great enemy. There was no need for him to personally suppress him anymore. All he could see was whether Li Qingshan would ask the monastery for reinforcements or not. A few months later, sure enough, the king of Southern Yu received news that Li Qingshan had obtained the Golden Hawk commander's permission to return to the Green Province silently. Li Qingshan flew through the air, gazing at the Green Province that he had been away from for a very long time. He obviously did not return to ask for reinforcements from the Chan Monastery of Devanaga, but because a communication jade in his Sumeru ring had suddenly shattered. Although there were many methods of communication in this world, many of them were either ineffective from tens of thousands of kilometers away, or they were extremely difficult and costly, making communication extremely inconvenient. In times of emergency, he could only use this primitive method to send messages. Communication jades were divided into yin and yang. Once one shattered, the other would shatter too. Li Qingshan had a total of 4 communication jades like this, each representing different things. One was with Han Qiongji, telling her to contact him if there was anything urgent. One had been given to him by the Golden Cicada Spirit King. He said he would give him a gift when he underwent the tribulation and ascended. One was given to Begonia. Originally, he wanted to use it to ask for reinforcements, but now, it had become a remembrance. The last one was given to Chu Danqing. Back then, he had agreed to contact Li Qingshan once the 3 Absolutes calligraphy was repaired. The one that had shattered right now was Chu Danqing's. It had been several years since they last met, and Chu Danqing had never contacted him. Li Qingshan had almost forgotten about this. He guessed he probably could not repair an arcane treasure like that with his cultivation. Now that he had suddenly contacted him, even Li Qingshan had no idea whether he had completed the repair or just given up on it. The 3 Absolutes calligraphy was different from regular arcane treasures. Not only did it contain a powerful path of the sword, but it was also connected to the secret of the painting tomb. It was even very likely for it to be crucial to killing the Dragon King of the Sea. It held great significance to Li Qingshan, which made him rather nervous and eager. Although he was in a hurry to find out the outcome, he did not use his demonic abilities along the way out of caution. Instead, he purposefully gave off a hint of Li Qingshan's aura. When he left the Mist Province, he even specially reported it to the Hawkwolf Guard so that no one could find fault with it. However, with his current cultivation, he traveled day and night without stopping, so he did not move slowly. A few days later, he returned to the territory of the Rui Commandery. He arrived in a mountain forest with beautiful scenery and dense spiritual qi. He knew this was where Chu Shidao cultivated in peace in the past. Dan Qing, I'm here. Li Qingshan arrived before the formation and called out. Only a while later did the formation open, letting Li Qingshan in. All he saw was a few thatched huts sitting on the white, sandy embankment beside the Lake of Jade. They seemed simple, but they merged with the surrounding scenery, forming a natural and harmonious picture. However, the surroundings of the thatched huts were overgrown with weeds, drowning out the path. It seemed extremely desolate. Clearly, it had been a very long time since anyone had taken care of it. Li Qingshan's face sank. The dwelling held great significance to Chu Danqing, yet he actually did not have the time to take care of it. Thump. Thump, thump. Li Qingshan knocked on the door. Qingshan, there's no need to be so polite. Come in. A weak voice rang out from behind the door. It was so feeble that it seemed like it could snap at any time. Li Qingshan pushed open the door and entered. A person currently sat on the couch in front of the window. When he saw the person, he could not help but be taken aback. He said in surprise, Danqing, how did you become like this? Chu Danqing was not a handsome man like Wasengzan, but he was still delicate and handsome, standing out from the crowd. However, his face was covered in wrinkles right now, and his eyes were turbid. His hair was grayish-white, and his skin was dry and pale. He seemed to have aged several decades. At that moment, Li Qingshan basically believed he was looking at Chu Shidao. He did not even look as good as Chu Shidao. More importantly, he had undergone the first heavenly tribulation a long time ago and become a foundation establishment cultivator, but his aura was so feeble right now that he seemed like a qi practitioner who had not even condensed a sea of qi. Seeing Li Qingshan, Chu Danqing stood up in excitement. He trembled so much that he almost fell over. Tears flowed out of his eyes, and his mouth opened and closed, but he could not make a sound. Don't be in such a hurry to speak. I told you to restore the three absolutes calligraphy, so you didn't have to end up like this. Li Qingshan hurriedly went forward to support him. He channeled a wave of spiritual qi into his body and felt that his cultivation had regressed greatly. Even his soul had been injured. He was in a worse state than Millipede, who had self-detonated his Yao core. Chapter 841. Li Qingshan was alarmed and treated him in a hurry. This man had probably done it just to watch. After saying his last words, he left. A while later, Chu Danqing finally woke up slowly. He let out a long sigh. Qingshan, you've really made things difficult for me. This blessing is just too great. I basically can't take it anymore. I almost lost my life. Why is it that I've made things difficult for you, and it's too great of a blessing? Didn't you repair it quite smoothly in the past? Li Qingshan had no idea how to react. This is the work of the five absolutes immortal. It's not just a simple patchwork. If it weren't for Master's many years of guidance, if it weren't for my jade blood of vermilion and black, I wouldn't even know where to start. Do you know how I've spent the past few years? The amount of blood I've used is enough to fill an entire pond. However, this is also a great blessing. It's allowed me to witness the true path of painting. It's just too shocking. I really don't know whether I should hate you or love you. Chu Danqing alternated between melancholy and excitement. In the end, he looked at Li Qingshan sorrowfully. If you have to choose one, you better hate me. Li Qingshan could not take it anymore. Take it? Chu Danqing took out a painting scroll from his 100 treasures pouch with great reluctance and passed it to Li Qingshan with his eyes closed. Li Qingshan unfurled the three absolutes calligraphy slowly, revealing a sword that was pitch black like ink. The sword's design was simple and imposing, but it was not particularly special. It did not give off any sword intent either. It was deep and restrained, giving nothing away. He could not help but praise, "What a sword!" Chu Danqing said, although it's called the three absolutes calligraphy, it's divided into primary and secondary. I've already achieved something with the path of the sword, so I'm no weaker than regular sword cultivators. Even if I go to the sword collection palace, I'll be able to become an inner disciple. Li Qingshan sat down with his legs crossed eagerly, refining the three absolutes calligraphy again. In that moment, sword chi flowed in reverse, and sword intent pierced his mind. In his sea of consciousness, the ink sword would split into thousands of pieces at times, forming a profound sword formation. At other times, it would merge as one, pointing at the sky and drawing the ground. Li Qingshan was prepared. The spirit tortoise pressed down. Over the past few months of cultivation, he had looked back on the various things in his dream, especially his miserable life. Although it was impossible for it to be as deep as what he had experienced in real life, he still gained some comprehension. The spirit turtle was only inferior to the ox demon and tiger demon, so he had benefited as well. His aura became even more tranquil and distant. On the other hand, the weakest phoenix's scripture of Nerva did not benefit much. It could not be helped. Li Qingshan's temperament was the most compatible with the ox demon and tiger demon, and he did not lack the tranquility and forbearance of the spirit turtle either. However, he really was not interested in the phoenix's noble heart. What benevolence, righteousness, propriety, wisdom, and trust? Why should people be bound by so many restrictions in their lives? What did it mean that they would not perch unless they were on a parasol tree, that they would not drink unless they were on a spring, that they would sleep on weeds when they were tired, and that they would drink from the yellow river when they were thirsty? What was the point of fussing over so much? His progress in the Phoenix Sutra of Nirvana had always been very slow. Even mastering the first and second stages was extremely difficult. It wasn't just a matter of balancing fire and water. The sword intent of the three absolutes calligraphy was powerful, but it was an item without a master after all. It could not be more powerful than the myriad poison ancestor's soul nascence, so he suppressed it without much effort. As for sword chi, it went without saying. After reaching the fifth layer of the ox demon, his body had become extremely tough. He guided the sword chi into his meridians before forcing it out through the acupoints all over his body. With a swoosh, a streak of blood appeared on Chu Danqing's face. He jumped in fright and turned around to run. Behind him, sword chi crisscrossed. Right now, he only had the cultivation of a chi practitioner. If he was hit by any of the sword chi, it would be fatal. If he were to die to the sword chi of the three absolute scripture after spending so many years of effort to repair it, that would be a great injustice. With a splash, he leapt into the lake. Li Qingshan refined the three absolutes calligraphy and arrived by the lake. He looked at the drenched Chu Danqing and smiled. "What are you afraid of? Am I supposed to harm you? I'm afraid you won't be able to control yourself when you refine it." Chu Danqing crawled out awkwardly. Suddenly, he remembered something and his face changed. A gentle breeze blew past, and the weeds around the thatched hut drifted away. Afterwards, the thatched hut shattered silently. "Li Qingshan, pay me back. How is it? Isn't it about the same as before? It's been so many years since I've done any work, but my skills haven't rusted." Li Qingshan clapped his hands and gazed at the newly built thatched hut by the lake in satisfaction. "It's not the same at all." Chu Danqing's voice was close to wailing. The thatched hut personally built by the king of savages was rather well behaved, but its picturesque artistic conception had been completely destroyed. And the items in the thatched hut were not particularly precious, but they were all Chu Shidao's belongings. Even Chu Danqing's childhood memories had been reduced to smithereens by the whistling sword chi. "I've spent quite a lot of effort too. During this time, I've already slaughtered quite a few golden core cultivators." At least nod your head. Alright, I'll apologize to you. But people always have to look forward. Let's take a look at your injuries. Li Qingshan channeled spiritual chi and fed him tree sap. He didn't hesitate to use all sorts of elixirs and miraculous medicines to finally stabilize Chu Danqing's injuries. However, if he wanted to recover his original cultivation, he would still need to recuperate slowly. Moreover, it would be very difficult to make up for the lost lifespan. "Danqing, it's been hard on you these past few years. Here's a toast to you." Under the bright moon, in front of the thatched hut, Li Qingshan smiled and raised his cup. The power of the three absolutes calligraphy was even greater than he had imagined. The five absolutes immortals' handiwork was indeed extraordinary. In terms of pure destructive power, this might be the strongest artifact he had ever obtained in his life. Furthermore, there was a complete set of sword Dao that was even stronger than the soaring dragon sword Dao. I've also benefited greatly. Speaking of which, I should be thanking you instead. I've even made you spend so many elixirs. Chu Danqing's appearance had mostly recovered. However, his hair was already gray, and he looked much older. He had calmed down from the grief and indignation of the thatched hut being destroyed. He felt that what Li Qingshan said made sense. Although he had placed his memories on it, it was still an inanimate object in the end. On the other hand, Li Qingshan had taken out many precious elixirs to treat his injuries. This made him feel a little embarrassed. The two of them drank to their heart's content until the moon was high in the sky. Then, they talked about the painting tomb again. Chu Danqing only said that there was no rush and that it wouldn't open so soon. When the painting tomb opens, you'll definitely get what you want. Although Li Qingshan was a little tipsy, he could vaguely sense that things were not as simple as they seemed. Chu Shidao probably did not ask him to help Chu Danqing just to deal with his senior brothers and sisters. Although the painting tomb was a secret, it had a wide influence. Chu Shidao's cultivation was not very high, so he did not seem to have the right to monopolize such a secret. Moreover, there were countless descendants of the school of painting who were stronger than him. Which one of them did not want to explore the painting tomb? It was a great fortune. Chu Shidao held this secret, and his disciples who had betrayed him also knew that he held this secret. The fact that he was able to die of old age meant many things in itself. After experiencing all sorts of things, or rather, after attaining a higher cultivation, Li Qingshan saw things even further. It would be fine if it was just a few descendants of the school of painting, but there was a hidden worry. It was the Dragon King of the Sea. He seemed to be inextricably linked to the 5 absolutes immortal. Chapter 842. Alright, let's go in and take a look together when the time comes. Chu Danqing's face was bright red. The dark chaos voice gradually faded away, falling asleep on the stone table. Danqing, Danqing. Li Qingshan called out a few times, but he received no response. He shook his head with a smile and left behind another bottle of pills and a communication jade before flying off into the horizon. Standing in the sky, his clothes ruffled in the fierce wind. The moonlight illuminated the cloud mountains nearby and far away. He gazed in the direction of the Clear River Prefecture and thought to himself, from the letters from a few months ago, Qiongji should be in secluded cultivation right now. She'll only emerge after another half a year. Even if I go, I won't be able to see her. Just visiting father-in-law Han is pointless. Although he wanted to visit Begonia, she had never contacted him. Either she was still in secluded cultivation and had not undergone the tribulation yet, or she had successfully undergone the tribulation but had no intention of seeing him. Regardless of which it was, there was no need for him to specially pay a visit. As for the Golden Cicada Spirit King, he probably needed no one to disturb him right now. After much thought, Li Qingshan still decided to return to the Mist Province first. A member of the Myriad Poison Cult. The door to the hall swung open loudly, and chilly winds surged out, sweeping up the dark green poisonous flames. An old man emerged from the hall. His expression was cold, and his aura surged. "Master, you've emerged. Congratulations on reaching a new level of cultivation, Master." Qian Liangmu rushed over in a hurry and bowed like he was overjoyed. He could vaguely sense that the Myriad Poison ancestor had become slightly different. His bearing seemed even more sunken and wispy. If the King of Southern Yu were present, he would definitely be able to tell that the Myriad Poison ancestor had become a ghost cultivator with a single glance, but Qian Liangmu was still lacking in insight. "You've contributed greatly during this period of time. I'm going on a long journey, so you'll be in charge of the Myriad Poison cult from today onwards. I hope there'll be a day when you undergo the 3rd heavenly tribulation and inherit the position of cult leader, bringing glory to our Myriad Poison cult," the Myriad Poison ancestor ordered. Qian Liangmu was overjoyed. This was exactly what he had been dreaming of. Now that he no longer had any competitors among his peers, There was no need for him to waste his efforts on fighting openly and covertly anymore. He could focus on cultivation. Although the cult had lost many disciples, they could slowly recover as long as he spent some time. The myriad poison cult's disaster was not necessarily a bad thing for him personally. Liangmu will never forget Master's kindness. I am willing to go through fire and water for myriad poison cult. Qian Liangmu expressed his loyalty, but he was also secretly worried. If the myriad poison ancestor told him to go to the king of Southern Yu's estate and ask for reinforcements to deal with Savage Mountain, then it would be troublesome. He did not want to clash with Li Qingshan right now. The myriad poison ancestor glanced at Qian Liangmu deeply, and the green flames in his eyes surged. Very good. That's enough for me. You better tidy up the affairs of the teaching first. I'll get my revenge sooner or later. Qian Liangmu exhaled in relief. When he raised his head again, the myriad poison ancestor had already turned into a streak of green light and vanished into the horizon. Although he was very curious about where the myriad poison ancestor was going, since the myriad poison ancestor refused to tell him, he was afraid to ask around carelessly. He guessed that the myriad poison ancestor wanted to find a way to exact revenge on Savage Mountain. The myriad poison ancestor flew 500 kilometers to the west and erased his aura, silently arriving on Savage Mountain. Before he could even report his arrival, the Banyan Tree King had opened the formation and let him in. The myriad poison ancestor stepped into Savage Mountain and bowed towards the towering Banyan Tree King first before sighing inside. He's actually gotten the Banyan Tree King to control the formations and watch over the entrance. It's no wonder I couldn't breach it back then. The king already possesses such cultivation in his 30s, so he possesses great fortune. I've really been asking for trouble by opposing him. However, being able to follow him now can be regarded as a blessing in disguise, and I've even obtained a secret technique for ghost cultivators like the scripture of the Ghost King. Yu Wufeng was cultivating in his residence when he suddenly felt uneasy. It was like a ferocious beast had entered his courtyard while he was sleeping. He stood up and arrived outside the dwelling. He saw the old man in green robes in the valley and could not help but widen his eyes. He cried out, "The myriad poison ancestor!" There was a flash of green light, and the myriad poison ancestor arrived before him. His eyes flickered with a poisonous light. "So it's little dog you of the sword pavilion. You've seen the ancestor, so why don't you drop to your knees and kowtow? Do you want to die?" Yu Wufeng said nothing more. He merged with his sword, turning into a streak of fogbow light and retreating rapidly. The myriad poison ancestor followed him like a shadow, tailing him relentlessly. After becoming a ghost cultivator, he was even faster than before. He snickered viciously and prepared various killing moves, which made Yu Wufeng feel an unprecedented sense of danger. Yu Wufeng originally believed that with the arcane treasure, the fogbow sword, and his cultivation at the peak of the second heavenly tribulation, he could easily stay alive even if he was not the myriad poison ancestor's opponent. Only now did he discover just how great the difference between them was. By staying alive, he had immediately mounted his sword and fled when he saw the myriad poison ancestor from afar. Now that the myriad poison ancestor had closed in on him, he was on the verge of death at any moment. "All right, myriad poison, stop messing around with him." A voice suddenly rang out, plain and dignified. "Yes, my king." The myriad poison ancestor's expression immediately became respectful, stopping his pursuit of Yu Wufeng. Only after flying a certain distance away did Yu Wufeng stop. He was filled with disbelief. Just who could order a great cultivator around like a servant? The person who spoke happened to be Li Qingshan, while the myriad poison ancestor had already arrived before Li Qingshan. "Be careful, my king," Yu Wufeng called out. The myriad poison ancestor was definitely not someone who would listen to orders obediently. As a matter of fact, he would kill whoever was ordering him around. "Shut up, puppy." The myriad poison ancestor's lips moved, and Yu Wufeng felt like he had just heard a clap of thunder. He was shaken up, but an even more shocking sight unfolded before him. The myriad poison ancestor bowed towards Li Qingshan before standing with his arms by his sides, like an old caretaker facing his only master in this life. He was gentle, polite, and respectful, without the slightest hint of viciousness. At this moment, the other cave masters heard the disturbance too, emerging from their respective dwellings. When they saw this, they were all dumbfounded. Li Qingshan had only said the myriad poison ancestor had joined their side. In the best-case scenario, he had just made some sort of deal, allowing the myriad poison ancestor to let go of his hatred of destroying his sect. Never did they think the myriad poison ancestor would actually submit to Li Qingshan. They basically doubted their eyes or something. "It's fine. You can go back and cultivate," Li Qingshan said before turning to the myriad poison ancestor. "Let's go in and talk in detail. How much of your cultivation have you recovered?" Li Qingshan asked after arriving in the 8-point hall. The myriad poison ancestor said, "It's all thanks to Sir Little An's scripture of the Ghost King that I've recovered around 80%. I've already completely become a ghost cultivator. I can now be known as the poison-assimilating Ghost King. If I continue to comprehend and cultivate, it's not impossible for me to recover 100%. The scripture of the Ghost King could be regarded as a peak cultivation method for ghost cultivators in this world. It was a secret technique of the Umbral Een sect. After becoming a ghost cultivator, before recovering all of his strength, there was even an opportunity for him to pursue a higher realm of cultivation. Chapter 843. However, that was already enough for Li Qingshan. Not only was the myriad poison ancestor's cultivation higher than his, but his strength was also greater too. If it were not for Little An's sneak attack in the past, coupled with the fact that he was caught off guard, he probably still would not have been the myriad poison ancestor's opponent. Even if his cultivation had advanced further now, his chances of victory would not be higher than 30% if they fought alone when they knew each other's strength. As a result, Li Qingshan was already extremely satisfied with a lackey like this. After asking a few more questions, he sent the myriad poison ancestor to Ru Xian's place to help out before turning to Little An. "How's your comprehension of the three absolutes calligraphy going? The path of the sword it contains is utterly wondrous. I still can't grasp it immediately." Little An held the unfurled three absolutes calligraphy in his hand and focused on comprehending it. Even when the myriad poison ancestor entered, he did not divert his attention to glance at it. "Why do I feel like I've basically grasped it with a single glance?" "You're still the smart one." Li Qingshan leaned over and glanced at the three absolutes calligraphy again. He really could not see anything else that he could comprehend, so he rubbed Little An's head and praised him. When he obtained the fragment of the three absolutes calligraphy in the past, he only treated it as a messy piece of calligraphy, but Little An was able to comprehend a sword style. His talent for comprehension was extraordinary, which was why he could see the even more intricate changes in the path of the sword. "I'll teach you once I learn it." Little An smiled. "Take your time. There's no rush. My demon dragon sword has been destroyed anyway." Li Qingshan laid out his hands. In his demon form, he did not need a treasured sword. A punch was enough. However, when he wanted to maintain his human identity, an arcane treasure weapon was still very important. He rubbed his chin and considered whether he should steal Yu Wufeng's fogbow sword or not. However, once he reached the South Sea, he still had to deal with the master of the sword pavilion. Perhaps he would need to borrow his strength, so there was no need for him to fall out with him over a sword. All he could do was wait until he returned to the Green Province and retrieve it from the Sword Collection Palace. "Why don't you look for Yin Qing and ask her to think of a way?" Little An thought of an idea. "What can she do?" Li Qingshan asked curiously. Many of the militarist's strongest weapons originate from the Azura path. They are known as Azura divine armaments. They are different from ordinary magic treasures and artifacts. They are more suitable for close combat. Li Qingshan didn't know much about this. Little An had received the best education since he was young and had a wide range of knowledge. Li Qingshan couldn't help but think of Yin Qing's circular blade. It was hard to say if it was a magic treasure because it didn't have many variations, but in terms of toughness and sharpness, it was definitely not inferior to the demon dragon sword. If he could obtain an Azura sword of that level, It would be enough to make up for the loss of the demon dragon sword. Alright, I'll go ask her. Under the snowy mountain in the Azura field, there was a large vermilion gate and a large courtyard. In front of the gate stood 2 stone lions and a hitching stone. It didn't look like a cultivation abode, but more like a mortal's residence. Li Qingshan paced back and forth in front of the gate and clicked his tongue in wonder. He hadn't paid attention to Yin Qing for a while, but she had already built such a building. Your Majesty, the general is waiting in the main hall. I will lead you there, an armored Azura said to Li Qingshan outside the gate. General? Heh, you really know how to play. Li Qingshan said and followed him in. Soon, they arrived at the main hall. Yin Qing was waiting in front of the hall. She was dressed in martial attire. She was very beautiful to begin with, and dressed like this, she looked even more valiant. She bowed elegantly and said, I thought your Majesty had already forgotten about me? Why do you say that? Li Qingshan said. Back then, your Majesty said you would help me recover my strength. I waited bitterly in the Azura field for almost a year, but there was no news. Yin Qing was slightly angry and had a different kind of charm. There is such a thing. Didn't I come this time for this? Li Qingshan rubbed his nose, feeling slightly embarrassed. She had risked her life for you, but you threw her to the side after using her, even forgetting about the promise. You really shouldn't have. He had been trapped in the nightmare of the Mirage Sea. It felt like it had only been a night, but it had actually been several months. Even though he had changed his mind in the dream, it had taken a lot of time to complete that life. After returning, he had gone into seclusion to cultivate, and it had taken another half a year. In total, it had been almost a year. I was just joking. Your Majesty doesn't need to take it to heart. Please come in. Yin Qing smiled. With her personality, how could she entrust her strength completely to someone else? Li Qingshan smiled slightly. You really have changed quite a bit. Compared to when he had just come from the Azura realm, he was much more normal. He was no longer purely a cold assassin, and he was more humane. Is that so? What does your Majesty think of my residence? Yin Qing raised her hand and introduced. Why did you think of building a residence like this? Li Qingshan asked curiously. This was my past home. I had nothing to do, so I built it for fun. Yin Qing spoke easily, but Li Qingshan saw that her eyes were rather bleak. He thought, speaking of which, she can be considered a transmigrator who has lived 2 lives. Before entering the Azura realm and becoming an Azura, she must have had a past. However, he was not willing to pry into her privacy, so he returned to the main topic. How can I help you recover your strength? I don't lack medicinal pills. Yin Qing had experienced countless battles of life and death, so she immediately regained her calm. As an Azura, no matter what kind of injuries I suffer, I should have recovered in a year's time. However, this is not the Azura realm after all. Also, for Azura, medicinal pills are not very useful. It's better to find a way to strengthen this Azura field and make it closer to the Azura realm. My recovery speed will naturally increase. If I can summon a few more Azura commanders for me to kill, my strength might even increase by another level. Li Qingshan had already learned from Yin Qing that Azura obtained power through battle and slaughter. However, it could only be done by killing Azuras of the same level or higher. The weaker one defeated the stronger one the greater the power one would obtain. A one-sided slaughter would obtain very little power, and it would even wear down one's fighting spirit. The gains did not make up for the losses. Once one's fighting spirit was gone, not only would one's power stagnate, it might even regress instead of advancing. Moreover, once one died in battle, there was no way to revive. The rules of the Azura realm are practically like online games. Killing monsters gives experience, and one can revive after death. If I go there, I really might be able to level up quickly. First of all, fighting spirit is definitely not a problem, and defeating the stronger is even more common. Li Qingshan shook his head and tossed this thought out of his mind. He said to Yin Qing, this is indeed a good idea. I'll find some people to fight in the Azura field during this time. He would let Yin Qing kill the Azura commanders she summoned to recover her strength, while he could obtain the weapons of these Azura commanders. It was the best of both worlds. The only problem was, what kind of people should he capture? Mortals were definitely out of the question. Although they could be easily infected by the Azura field and develop hysterical killing intent, they definitely could not compare to cultivators. Li Qingshan was not willing to do something like that. Those who used the sword died to the sword. Since he had stepped onto this cultivation path, it was very normal for them to fight and kill each other. However, he was not willing to be like demonic cultivators, massacring mortals on a large scale for the sake of refining an arcane treasure. Chapter 844. Just wait until the day your strength recovers. Don't say I don't keep my word. Li Qingshan said to Yin Qing and immediately left the Azura field. He told Little and about his plans, and Little and agreed. If we want this to go smoothly, I'll have to ask the Banyan Tree King. That was exactly what Li Qingshan was thinking, so he arrived under the great banyan tree. Fellow, I've something to trouble you with again. As long as you don't need me to help you charge through enemy lines, there's no need to hold back. Feel free to tell me. The Banyan Tree King also joked. Ever since Li Qingshan returned from the Mirage Sea, they had become a little closer. The Clam King of Mirage Sea undergoing the tribulation had clearly stirred up this Demon King of the Mist Province. However, after hearing Li Qingshan's request, the Banyan Tree King fell silent. Why do you ask this? With your wisdom, can't you guess? Li Qingshan said. You sure are a good match with that little girl. Both of you are tempted to destroy her entire clan. The Banyan Tree King smiled bitterly. Surely you don't have to protect even bone-eating shamans, fellow. It's not like they're demons. If they're humans, they feed on humans. Perhaps if they develop further, they can be regarded as other folk. Li Qingshan's target was the bone-eating shamans who had once hunted him down. Back then, he heard that there were many bone-eating shaman tribes scattered across the Mist Province. There were even cities of bone-eating shamans, which was equivalent to a large group of cultivators. Bone-eating shamans were violent and bloodthirsty by nature, so their battle intent and killing intent went without saying. Using them to strengthen the Azura field would definitely be extremely effective. And the special tradition of bone-eating shamans eating humans ensured that they did not have many allies. It was impossible to kill one and create a whole horde of them, which would be beyond the point of no return in the end. It was basically perfect. Who knew how many bone-eating shaman tribes there were, scattered across the mountains and forests of the Mist Province? Finding them would be far too troublesome, so he obviously had to ask the Banyan Tree King. The Banyan Tree King pondered for a moment. Bring me the map. Without a doubt, this had once again broken his principle of neutrality. However, there had never been an absolute neutrality. As a demon king, the Banyan Tree King was very clear about his position. Neutrality was established on the basis of power and balance. He was a towering tree that towered into the sky, not a grass on the wall that swayed back and forth. Li Qingshan immediately took out the mental map of the Mist Province and got the Banyan Tree King's guidance. A while later, specks of light lit up on it. As a matter of fact, the brightness of the specks varied according to the strength of the bone-eating tribes. The brightest one was in the east of the Mist Province. The Banyan Tree King emphasized the introduction, this is Bone-Eating City. There's a bone-eating shaman king watching over it. Coupled with the Cheongchi totem they worship, they're equivalent to two great cultivators. Once they work together, they'll be even more powerful. If you're not confident, don't take action so easily. I understand. Li Qingshan said. Defeating a single myriad poison ancestor was already extremely difficult, let alone two. And he had defeated the myriad poison ancestor through a defensive counterattack. If he attacked the myriad poison cult, only death awaited him. However, Li Qingshan was rather tempted. If he could fight the bone-eating shaman king in the Azura field, he would gain another Azura commander at the very least, and he might even be able to break through to the 5th layer of the tiger demon. Now that he had gained a powerful helper in the form of the myriad poison ancestor, it would be far too much of a pity if he did not use him. He obviously had no chance of victory in a direct confrontation, but what if he drew the bone-eating shaman king out of his territory? If he, Little N, and a poison-assimilating Ghost King rose up together, the outcome would be difficult to say. Li Qingshan dismissed his thoughts and decided to go from weak to strong, taking things step by step. After discussing with Little and again, he gathered the 10 cave masters in the main hall on the main peak of Savage Mountain and issued an order. The points on the map are the bone-eating shaman tribes. Now, I want you to go to these tribes. Heh, these bone-eating shamans even wanted to eat me back then? Li Qingshan smiled. He remembered what he had said to Ru Xian recently, revenge 100 times over. Now, it had basically come true. You wanted to eat me back then, but now, it's my turn to eat you and all of you. However, there were far too many tribes of bone-eating shamans. They basically covered the entire Mist Province. If Li Qingshan searched through them one by one, even if he destroyed one a day, it would still take him over 2 years. At this moment, the benefits of having subordinates were demonstrated. I wonder which tribe is so bold. I'll go destroy them right now. The gentleman of heavenly blubber expressed his loyalty loudly. He added inside, as long as it's not the largest and brightest speck of light, it's fine. The existence of the bone-eating shaman king is no secrets. I've already destroyed that tribe back then. Li Qingshan shrugged. Then, do you want us to slaughter these tribes, my king? The gentleman of heavenly blubber was secretly speechless. Originally, he believed he was already vicious, but compared to this king of savages, he was still nowhere close. Just because a bone-eating tribe had offended him in the past, he wanted to destroy all the bone-eating shaman tribes in the entire Mist Province right now. No, I want you to bring back all these bone-eating shamans, and you can't kill a single one of them. Li Qingshan gazed at the mental map of the Mist Province. He had already begun imagining thousands, no, 100,000 shamans gathered in the Azura field and slaughtering one another. The corner of his lips curled into a smile. It made the cave master shiver. If killing them was not enough, were they supposed to capture these bone-eating shamans alive and torture them all over again? May I ask why exactly, my king? Yu Wufeng stood up. He did not believe Li Qingshan was that deviant. For forging artifacts. All right, that's the last question. All of the spoils of this trip belong to you. Oh right, the bone-eating tribe all has a Qiongqi totem. There's a skull behind the totem mural. I only want this. As Li Qingshan said that, he took out the spoils of war and displayed it. It still possessed heavy malice and malice. Li Qingshan had no need for malice, but malice was very useful, so he might as well collect it and study it. Even if he could not come up with anything, he could give it to Little and to refine. It would not go to waste. Yes, my lord. The 10 cave masters all thought to themselves, it's not like the bone-eating tribe is a cultivation sect, so how many spoils of war can there be? Although they were extremely reluctant, none of them were bold enough to say no. Right now, they were no longer just bound by the blood oath. After witnessing the myriad poison ancestors' submission, they felt fear towards Li Qingshan from the bottom of their hearts. After explaining the general plan, Li Qingshan sat back down on the throne. Little N explained it to them in detail. There were so many places, some near and some far away, some strong and some weak. Who was in charge of where and how they were supposed to go? There had to be an overall and detailed plan in order to achieve the greatest efficiency. Yu Wufeng, you'll be in charge of this region. Apart from these points, Little N had a plan in mind and immediately began assigning tasks. She did not just consider the bone-eating tribes near and far areas, but even the cultivation of the 10 cave masters, their different abilities, and their speed were all taken into consideration. The ones she wanted the 10 cave masters to deal with were the weakest specks of light with the greatest number. These bone-eating tribes were all like the one Li Qingshan had destroyed in the past. They did not even have a single one who had undergone the heavenly tribulation. It felt a little like overkill, but according to what Li Qingshan had said, the Qiongqi totem of these tribes all possessed the strength of demon generals. If they were stronger tribes, perhaps they would possess the strength of demon commanders, and the tribes would probably possess formations too. As a result, she decided to use the method of a lion hunting a rabbit to ensure the absolute smoothness and secrecy of the plan. As for the stronger tribes, They would personally deal with them. Actually, it would not be a waste of time like that, as there were extremely few of these stronger tribes. By the time they swept through all of these tribes, even the 10 cave masters might not necessarily be able to complete the mission. Sir Little, and how are we supposed to bring these people back? 100 treasures pouches can't hold living creatures. Although we can use techniques to trap them, it's far too conspicuous. How are we supposed to hide them? A cave master asked with a frown. Yeah. Don't tell me we're supposed to use bug pouches or seals. Only a few people can fit in there. Don't tell me we're supposed to rush back and forth across several tens of thousand kilometers. Another cave master added. Tools that could hold living creatures did exist, such as bug pouches for nurturing insects and seals for taming beasts, but the space was extremely limited. They could not even hold a single shaman from the bone-eating tribe. Use Sumeru rings. Little and said expressionlessly. There was a qualitative difference between Sumeru rings and 100 treasures pouches. Although they could not create their own world like the Azura field, they could hold living creatures. But apart from the first cave master, second cave master, and fifth cave master, we don't have any Sumeru rings here. Forging Sumeru rings was rather difficult, and to regular cultivators, a sufficiently large 100 treasures pouch was enough. Unless they were clans or sects with a very deep foundation, they would never waste materials to forge them, so they could be regarded as rather precious. And the cultivators of the Mist Province were slightly poorer than the Green Province on average. Li Qingshan had considered this a long time ago. He pressed his hand against the stone table and slid it across from left to right, leaving behind 5 Sumeru rings. After so many years of war, he had accumulated quite a bit. However, it had taken him quite a lot of effort to gather so many Sumeru rings. For the sake of this plan, he had removed both his and Little Anne's Sumeru rings, moving the items inside into his 100 treasures pouch. It was all thanks to the myriad poison ancestor. All of the cave masters' gazes were drawn over, and they sighed in amazement. Their gazes towards Li Qingshan became even more reverent. He obviously would not be so bored as to collect Sumeru rings. Behind every single Sumeru ring was the death of a powerful cultivator. I'll lend them to you for now, but I'm still missing 2. Do you have any ideas? If you don't tell me the truth, you'll be breaking the blood oath. Li Qingshan refused to believe that there were so many people here that he could come up with no ideas. Sure enough, after he mentioned the blood oath, another cave master expressed that he had an arcane artifact similar to a Sumeru ring that could carry a few people. In the end, he gathered the bug pouches together and resolved this problem. All right, you can set off according to the plan. I'll be waiting for the good news of your victory. Li Qingshan waved his hand, and the 10 cave masters left with his orders. Let's go too. Chapter 845. Let's go with this place for our first stop. Li Qingshan pointed at a bright speck of light on the mental map of the Mist Province with his index finger. Under the bright sunlight, the dense, green sea of trees rose and fell. The wide, thick leaves wove together to form a boundless green cloud. No matter how resplendent the sunlight was, it was unable to penetrate it. It was gloomy under the crisscrossing canopy of branches. A tree about 2,000 feet tall stood in the middle of the forest. The trunk of the tree was densely covered with tree holes, like a beehive. Large, vicious-looking bone-eating shamans moved through it. Although they seemed like beasts, they clearly possessed an order and division of labor. When regular bone-eating shamans saw the lofty shaman priests, they had to lower their heads in respect. There were also the patrolling guards who glanced around with their sharp gazes. Of course, there were also hunters responsible for hunting. At this moment, a group returned. They obviously did not hunt anything else. Every single bone-eating shaman carried humans on their shoulders. Most of them were women. Some of them had fainted, so they could be considered as lucky. As for those who were conscious, they could only watch as the bone-eating tribe drew closer. They felt like they had fallen into a bottomless abyss, filled with fear and despair. The bone-eating shaman at the very front of the group was also the largest. Even with his hunched back, he was still as tall as 2 people. 2 long, boar-like teeth protruded from the corner of his mouth, which was extremely eye-catching. Tusk let out a strange, excited roar. The corner of his mouth was filled with blood. It could be described as a huge, gaping mouth. Countless roars rang out in the bone-eating tribe too, welcoming the returning hunters and the food they had brought back. The roars echoed through the dark forest. It was basically like living in hell. The woman on Tusk's shoulder could not endure the terrifying pressure anymore. She let out a hysterical shriek. Tusk turned around and let out a deterring growl, but the smell of blood and foul wind made the woman completely collapse. Her shriek became even more shrill. Tusk lost his patience. He bit off the woman's head in a single bite, crunching it to pieces. Brain juices flowed from the corner of his mouth as blood spurted from the severed neck. As if he had already eaten his fill from hunting, Tusk tossed the headless corpse far away, landing beside a group of small bone-eating shamans who played around. These small bone-eating shamans were only half the height of a grown man. Apart from their sharp teeth and claws, they clearly possessed many of the characteristics of humans. However, as soon as they saw the female corpse, they immediately rushed over viciously, tearing at one another and tearing at one another. They tore the female corpse to pieces and feasted on her. Tusk laughed aloud. The other bone-eating shamans laughed too. At this moment, a bone-eating shaman priest scolded Tusk a few times. Women were for reproduction. He had brought them back after so much difficulty, so how could he waste them like this? Fong did not dare to contradict him. He bowed his head and pleaded guilty. The strange laughter around him grew louder. The bone-eating shaman priest did not delve too deeply into the matter, ordering them to take the prey back. The laughter echoed in the forest for a long time, and the smell of blood lingered. The bone-eating shaman priest gazed at this and sighed from the bottom of his heart. What a peaceful day. Several dozen kilometers away, Li Qingshan heard the strange laughter that sounded like the roar of a wild beast. He said to Little and beside him, "It should be right up ahead. Let me use the profound light illuminates all to take a look first." With a wave of his hand, the spirit turtle's profound shell illuminated the bone-eating tribe. Li Qingshan paid special attention to the dark red totems painted on the tree, vaguely forming a hole that enveloped the entire tree. It doesn't seem to be a regular formation, and it doesn't have any defensive functions. Its exact functions are very difficult to determine. "There are many ancient secret techniques passed down through the Mist Province," said Little, "and won't we know once we try it?" It was exactly because this was the first battle that Li Qingshan became cautious. According to the brightness of the specks of light, there were roughly several hundred bone-eating shamans in the bone-eating tribe, and there was a leader who had undergone the heavenly tribulation. As for the strength of the Cheongqi totem, it was difficult to determine, but it probably could not be stronger than a demon commander. This was a battle where he possessed an absolute advantage. There was no need for any schemes at all. All he had to do was crush his opponent head-on. In the blink of an eye, he crossed several dozen kilometers. The moment he approached the tree where the bone-eating tribe resided, Li Qingshan sensed the function of the formation. It seems to be able to weaken the enemy. The totems all lit up, and the condensed smell of blood suddenly thickened, radiating with a great pressure. He felt a hint of resistance, and even the spiritual qi of the world was affected. However, this did not affect Li Qingshan at all. The bone-eating shamans noticed Li Qingshan too. They all roared and lunged over, running through the treetops like the wind and as swift as leopards. However, Li Qingshan had enough time to study every single one of them. Looks like it strengthened their abilities by quite a lot. How troublesome. The troublesome he was talking about was obviously not the bone-eating shamans before him who had not even undergone a single heavenly tribulation, but the bone-eating shaman king thousands of kilometers away. He deduced the layout of the bone-eating city. If it also possessed a formation like this, it would probably be 10 times or even 100 times more powerful. Coupled with the Cheongqi totem that possessed the strength of a demon king, it would be useless no matter how he erupted on the spot. And the bone-eating shaman king was different from the myriad poison ancestor. He was a melee fighter with a tough body, so it would be very difficult for him to launch a sneak attack successfully. Even if he succeeded out of luck, it would not be of any decisive use. I definitely can't clash with the bone-eating shaman king there. I don't even have a 10% chance of victory. Li Qingshan sighed and exhaled, producing a gust of wind that whistled through the air and turned into a tornado, sweeping away all the bone-eating shamans before him. The Azura field was already in his hand, producing a blood-red swirl that swallowed the bone-eating shamans. Li Qingshan did not enter the tree hole. He simply stood at the entrance and whistled in with the wind, sweeping up the bone-eating shamans one by one and sending them into the Azura field. He was like an anteater, extending his long tongue into the nest of ants and sticking it to them one by one. A furious roar rang out from the hole, and even the tree swayed. An extraordinarily fierce bone-eating shaman rushed out against the wind. He was the leader of the bone-eating shamans who had undergone the heavenly tribulation. Li Qingshan glanced at the bone-eating shaman leader. If it were not for the sake of refining the Azura field, his gust of wind would have crushed the entire tree to pieces. In order to ensure that these bone-eating shamans had enough mental fortitude to fight, he was as gentle as he could be, doing his best to prevent them from being harmed at all. The bone-eating shaman leader stiffened up. His mind that had almost gone mad suddenly experienced great fear. In a daze, he saw a scarlet tiger staring at him, its eyes like blood and fire, its expression blank like it had sunk into a nightmare. The gust of wind swept him into the Azura field powerlessly. This move really does work. As it turns out, turning souls into haunts is only a superficial effect. The deeper effect is to stun the soul. I'll see if I can make the living submit to me later. That way, no matter how many enemies there are, as long as they're weaker than me, I can turn them all into slaves with a single glance. Wouldn't that be insane? Chapter 846. The towering tree shook violently. The whistling tornado poured in through the largest tree hole. The twisting and turning caves roamed through the entire bone-eating tribe, capturing bone-eating shamans one by one. Before this unstoppable ability, even the brutal bone-eating shamans let out cries of fear, drowned out by the wind. In the depths of the tribe, in a huge tree hole, the great shaman priest who was only second to the tribe chief danced in front of the totem murals in colorful clothes, chanting like he was singing. Even through the heavy door, the sharp whistle of the fierce wind passing through the cave still seemed to ring out clearly. The tree seemed to have become a flute, played by an invisible giant like it was a joke, but it was a disaster for the entire bone-eating tribe. The eyes of the monster in the totem suddenly lit up, producing a roar that drowned out the sound of the wind. Li Qingshan stood firmly on the huge branch. Of course, the branch was so large that even 10 people would struggle to wrap their arms around it. The young lady stood beside him quietly. Not only did the white lunar monk's robe not lose its color, but it also seemed even more clear and ethereal. Her unparalleled beauty had once been evaluated as a national beauty, but looking at her now, it seemed to be shallow and powerless. It was difficult to describe her true charm. Compared to what she was pursuing, what was a beauty that could cause the downfall of a city and overturn all living things? Qingshan, what are you thinking about? I'm thinking about my new ultimate move. I'll show you right now. Li Qingshan returned to his senses and decided to give it a try. He casually grabbed a bone-eating shaman from the Azura field, which happened to be Tusk. Before he could even understand what was going on, his entire mind was occupied by a pair of scarlet eyes. His viciousness completely turned into fear, and his body trembled like he was electrocuted. He seemed to want to flee, but he did not show much interest in submitting. As if it was different from what he had imagined, Li Qingshan's eyes widened, and he exerted a little more force. The veins on Tusk's vicious face bulged, wriggling about like earthworms. With a bang, his head exploded. Afterwards, his soul successfully turned into a haunt, nodding and bowing towards Li Qingshan. It's different, Littlin smiled. The bone-eating shamans who had almost been swept over by the breath all stared blankly at their own safety. What's different? Li Qingshan said. Her smile made his heart skip a beat. The girl was becoming prettier and prettier. If she grew a little older, there really would be no one he had seen in his life who could match her. Brother Ox's cultivation method sure was wondrous. But apart from that, there was nothing else. In some aspects, he was indeed extraordinarily stubborn. Once he had made up his mind on a certain point of view, he would not change it. Little and explained, the divine soul and the physical body are completely different. If the divine soul is like water, then the physical body is like a cup filled with water. It's hard to say which is stronger and which is weaker. The water can be twisted at will, and the cup will shatter if it is violently twisted. Your supernatural power is to reshape the shape of the water, so to change the shape of the water, you must first break the cup. The ghosts of the hungry ghost realm could devour their own kind to strengthen themselves, but even the bone-eating shamans who ate humans required a conversion process. Moreover, the inner demons of ghosts were much larger than those of living creatures. Once they lost their stable bodies, it would be very difficult to restrain their thoughts. This was also the importance of a physical body. I see. Li Qingshan nodded. If it were not for the fact that his body had been destroyed, with the myriad poison ancestors' temperament and cultivation, even with the Clam King of Mirage Sea's assistance, why would he submit to someone else? Although he was rather disappointed, he had at least managed to understand the principle behind the tiger demon's supernatural power. It would be a little more wondrous when he used it in the future. This move is extremely effective against children. Whoever it stares at will die. I just wonder how effective it will be against true third heavenly tribulation experts. I'm not asking for too much. I just want a split second of absent-mindedness. In thought, Li Qingshan felt like calling the supernatural power accomplice to the tiger was no longer particularly appropriate, so he discussed it with Little and beside him. Little and said, "You comprehended this move in your nightmare. The enemies who fall for it will feel like they are trapped in a nightmare too. Let's call it the Nightmare Tiger's demonic eye." Alright, let's call it the Nightmare Tiger's demonic eye. Li Qingshan repeated it a few times and found it to be a good name. At this moment, another roar rang out from the tree hole. A Cheongchi totem shaped like a black tiger with a pair of wings on its ribs rushed out of the tree hole under the great shaman priest's control. However, it was over 10 times larger than regular tigers, giving off heavy malice and malice. However, Li Qingshan was rather disappointed. The Cheongchi totem did not possess the strength of a demon commander like he had imagined. At most, it was a powerful demon general with a special bloodline. Clearly, even with an ancient secret technique, the tremendous difference between realms of cultivation could not be overcome so easily. I wonder if the Nightmare Tiger's demonic eye is effective against totemic beasts like this? Li Qingshan wanted to give it a try without spending any money, so he used the Nightmare Tiger's demonic eye and looked over. In the blink of an eye, Cheongchi lunged right in front of him, opening its mouth filled with sharp teeth and biting towards him. He glared at it, and it suddenly froze up, unable to move. Li Qingshan glared again, and Cheongchi's colossal body began to twist and distort like smoke. Before long, it collapsed and dispersed. Ugh, my eyes are sore. Li Qingshan blinked his eyes and decided that he would just use his abilities in the future. It was best if he did not glare too hard. Little and laughed again. Yeah. Soulless objects can't be turned into haunts, but they don't have a physical body. Instead, they're an amalgamation of countless thoughts, so the effects are quite impressive. The gust of breath swept up the great shaman priest and tossed him into the Azura field. The entire bone-eating tribe was swept away, only leaving behind a few captured humans. They had no idea what was going on with their faces filled with fright, and there were even a few who had already become numb to despair. The gust of breath had clearly destroyed their prison doors, but not a single one of them was bold enough to flee. Li Qingshan ignored these people. Once they've stuck around long enough, they'll have to flee sooner or later. There's no need for them to repay him for saving my life. He drew in the last gust of breath, which swept up a few translucent skulls that seemed both human and beast. They were of much better quality than the one he obtained before. Little and stared at them from the side too. Li Qingshan smiled. I'll give them to you once I'm done using them. Yep, those bone-eating shamans too. They'll all be used as firewood for you. Though, I still need to think about how to absorb the malice inside. I have an idea. Little Anne's eyes swiveled around, and she came up with an idea. You always have an idea. Li Qingshan pinched her cheek. It was soft and smooth to the touch, as if it was about to melt between his fingers. I'm not a child anymore. Stop rubbing my head, pinching my face, and my nose all day long. Little Anne glared at Li Qingshan. These actions that represented intimacy in the past only made her slightly jealous now. She had already recovered her memories as the princess. She was no longer that ignorant little ghost. However, because she practiced the path of white bone and great beauty, she did not seem any difference. In my eyes, you'll always be a child. Li Qingshan smiled. He reached over with his other hand and pinched her other cheek, rubbing and rubbing her face that was known as a heavenly beauty around. And you still want to kiss me? Little Anne insisted that he admit to her charm. Li Qingshan smiled. He had been prepared for this a long time ago. That's where you don't understand. Dreams are all inverted. If you want to kiss me in a dream, it means you don't want to kiss me in reality at all. Otherwise, would I want to wander around in the desert? Little Anne was utterly infuriated by his rude and unreasonable quibble. All right. I want to kiss you, I want to kiss you. So fragrant. Li Qingshan immediately admitted defeat. He lowered his head and kissed her face a few times, rubbing her head. Are you satisfied now? You're brushing me off, and you're even rubbing my head. Little ancestor, stop making things difficult for me. Can I even rub your head? Who told you to be shorter than me? You're the one who's too tall. I'm not short at all. Li Qingshan said, I'm just saying. Let's go. We still have a lot of places to go. Little Anne made up her mind. There would be a day when she would make him understand her charm. In the Azura field, the sounds of battle shook up the sky. On the snowy mountain, Qing led a group of Azura, standing on the side of a cliff and gazing into the distance. In the very center of the Azura field, under the blood-red sky, thousands of bone-eating shamans slaughtered one another on the ground. Under the influence of the Azura field, every single one of them had become bloodshot. They could no longer differentiate between friend and foe. They only wanted to kill every living creature they saw. Murderousness surged into the air. The blood-red swirl in the sky slowly began to revolve. The Azuras all became restless. Unlike the Azura commander Qing, who was tired of fighting and killing, they still maintained their exuberant battle intent. They requested to fight time and time again, but were all suppressed by Qing. Although they did not dare to resist, they all looked dissatisfied. In the Azura realm, women had always been discriminated against, and Qing's identity was an assassin, not a general. Coupled with the fact that she was injured now and her strength had declined, it made it even more difficult for them to accept her. Since you want to go, then go. A voice rang out from behind. Li Qingshan arrived beside Qing. Yes, sir. The Azura rallied with vigor and all brushed past Li Qingshan, directly leaping off the cliff and falling into a cone-shaped battle formation, charging towards the battlefield in the distance. Battle was the meaning, and slaughter was destiny. Even if they died in battle here, they could be reborn in the Azura realm. Men are still more suited for the battlefield after all. Though, my king, doesn't that mean I won't have anyone to order me around? Qing glanced at Li Qingshan unhappily. Li Qingshan smiled. It's not like you're fighting anyone here, so what are you ordering so many people around for? Just stay here and watch the show. Didn't you say there were second heavenly tribulation existences among the bone-eating shamans? Why don't I see any? What kind of show is this? Qing said. Although bone-eating shamans are brutal in nature, they've reached the second heavenly tribulation, so they already possess very powerful willpower. They won't be disturbed by the Azura field so easily. Releasing them now will only disrupt the battlefield. Moreover, if an Azura commander shows up later, can you win? I can't, Qing said calmly. She had yet to recover from her wounds completely. Although assassins had to defeat those stronger than them, there was not a single weakling among Azura commanders. They would even surpass her in battle. Chapter 847. What a great plan, my king. Yin Qing glanced at Li Qingshan deeply. He was already in his 30s, but he only seemed like he was in his early 20s. His bearing was like a mountain, unshakable. His gaze was deep, distant, and unfathomable. However, he was not completely composed. Sometimes, he would smile innocently and say some things that completely contradicted his identity as the king of savages. As a result, after spending some time with him, she would even find him very amiable and peaceful. However, when it came to the specifics, it would be a different story. His plan was without a doubt to unleash the full potential of the bone-eating shamans. Only a relatively balanced battle would be the most intense, providing the Azura field with the most power. The group of Azura were all sacrifices too, including her. Actually, Li Qingshan was only the decision-maker. He had left the specific details to little N. He was not actually skilled in meticulous planning. However, little N's plans were his plans. If he had done it, then he had done it. There was nothing to deny. As a result, he smiled. Wasn't it all for your sake in the beginning? No matter how I schemed, I'll always support you. I won't let your life be in danger. Although he was very vengeful, he would never forget the help that others had given him. Yin Qing looked at his sincere smile and felt her heart warm up for some reason. Then thank you, my king. I don't want to return to the Azura realm for now. That's not up to you right now. You're mine now. If you do return to the Azura realm one day, you'll definitely be fighting under my banner. Li Qingshan waved his hand forcefully. I hope so too. As they spoke, the battle formation assembled by the Azura had already killed their way into the battlefield. Their auras merged together, like a steel blade plunging into butter. Wherever they passed by, blood splattered and limbs flew everywhere. The bone-eating shamans were all routed. Even the tribal leaders who had undergone the heavenly tribulations struggled to fend off their attacks. They were slain in a single clash, their bodies torn to pieces. The Azura charged back and forth, sweeping through everything in their path. The intensity of the battlefield increased once again. If this were a regular clash between armies, the bone-eating shamans would have still collapsed. However, in the Azura field, everyone's battle intent had been pushed to the limit. They were delirious. Instead, they were attracted by the Azura's aura and rushed towards them without a care for anything else. With a thought from Li Qingshan, several thousand more bone-eating shamans were thrown into the Azura field. Among them were 3 tribal chieftains who had undergone the heavenly tribulation and a great shaman priest who knew how to cast techniques. They finally stopped the Azura's advance. Although the Azuras had all sorts of advantages, they were still outnumbered and trapped in a turbulent sea of people. They gradually showed signs of exhaustion. They wanted to break out of the encirclement again, but Li Qingshan just happened to have almost 20,000 bone-eating shamans blocking their path several times. Trapped in the encirclement, they began to suffer injuries and deaths. However, the more desperate the situation was, the purer and denser the Azura's fighting spirit became. His killing intent was like a beacon that shot into the sky. The blood-colored vortex spun even faster. Originally, Little N's plan was to deplete all of these Azura here, sacrificing them to the Azura field through a battle to the death. However, when he saw this, Li Qingshan instead found it rather difficult to spare them. They won't die. Yin Qing had been observing Li Qingshan the entire time and said, Li Qingshan turned around. Since you don't need them to fight, why don't you just let them go? Every single Azura has to go through countless battles, deaths, and resurrections before they can reach the apex. They've never had any enemies here, so as time goes on, their battle spirits will inevitably be damaged. This is far worse than physical damage. Once their battle spirits wear away, they'll truly be dead. Keeping them here will instead harm them. Why don't you let them return to the Azura realm with battle spirits? Yin Qing said. Li Qingshan nodded and threw another 20,000 bone-eating shamans into the battlefield. They were like a colossal meat grinder, annihilating all life. He had captured close to 100,000 bone-eating shamans from various parts of the Mist Province. It was even greater than when Si Qing refined the Azura field in the past. And, probably many of the bone-eating shamans who died here would return to the Azura realm and be reincarnated as Azura. Aren't you afraid that your battle spirits will wear away? Li Qingshan asked Din Qing. I'm a mighty Azura commander, so how can I be compared to these little guys? A little rest is nothing. Not to mention, just keeping that poison-using old man busy has made up for all my slacking off in the past few days. Even if I want to wear away my battle spirits with you, it won't be easy. There will be even better battles waiting for you in the future. Li Qingshan smiled. He thought to himself, once this refinement is complete, I should be able to trap third heavenly tribulation existences for a while. There was no need for him to trap third heavenly tribulation existences here. That was impossible. All he had to do was obstruct their escape slightly, and the Azura field would become a battlefield that would not stop until one of them died. A while later, the last Azura died in battle. Before he died, he even dragged a bone-eating chieftain down with him. Blood flowed like rivers on the ground, seeping deeply into the soil. A single step would sink into the mud, like a swamp of blood. The blood continued to seep downwards until it reached the center of the Azura field. Blood-red light filled the surroundings, becoming more and more compatible with the will of the Azura realm, but no Azura descended. This was under Li Qingshan's conscious control. As the Azura field rapidly strengthened, it could already block out regular Azura, saving its strength and waiting for an Azura commander to appear. Li Qingshan simply threw all of the bone-eating shamans into the battlefield, only keeping the 6-second heavenly tribulation bone-eating shamans suppressed. 2 of them were shaman priests. In order to capture them alive, it had taken him quite a bit of effort. Now, they were all suppressed, waiting for the Azura commander that could rival them to appear. After waiting for a while longer, Li Qingshan suddenly said, "He's finally here." Violent murderousness surged out from the depths of the blood-red swirl, sweeping through the entire battlefield. A blood-red comet descended from above, slamming into the ground viciously. With a great boom, a wave of earth swept out into the surroundings. Several hundred bone-eating shamans were directly shaken to death, while over 1,000 bone-eating shamans were sent flying. In the huge, deep pit created by the collision, a vicious, bald, burly man leapt out. He happened to be an Azura commander. However, to Li Qingshan's disappointment, the weapon in his hand was a huge, spiky club, dark and glossy with a layer of blood-red light. At first glance, it seemed like a huge club. Its surface was uneven, and the spiky teeth varied in size too, protruding from it in a sparse and messy manner. However, it gave off an indescribable sense of viciousness. Li Qingshan nodded to himself. This weapon suited his taste very well. Yin Qing said, "It's time for the main show." The Azura commander sensed something and gazed at the great snow mountain, but it was empty. Chapter 848. The powerful bone-eating shamans entered the Azura field and immediately broke free from the suppression. They both raised their guard when they saw one another. They all came from different tribes. Bone-eating shamans had always had a tradition of eating their own clansmen. Compared to corpses, all of them preferred living ones. Unlike regular bone-eating shamans, they instead seemed closer to humans on the outside. They restrained the various powers in their bodies and condensed them in their skulls, which they called the brain core. They were similar to the demon cores of demons and the golden cores of human cultivators. If they could eat their opponent's brain core and body, their strength would skyrocket. No one could resist this temptation. However, this stalemate only lasted for a split second. The sight before them left them astounded even though they were used to seeing slaughter. Under the blood-red swirl, countless bone-eating shamans of various sizes slaughtered one another. Corpses piled up into a thick layer as the battle cries were deafening. "Where is this? I want to kill too. That man." A bone-eating shaman said hoarsely. When he recalled the pair of terrifying scarlet eyes, his heart shivered, and he felt even more hatred. "I don't know. We were all captured. This seems to be the aura of the Azura realm. We have to keep our minds focused, or we'll end up killing one another just like them," said a bone-eating shaman priest. A bone-eating shaman priest said. He seemed like a hunchbacked old man, holding a walking stick. Bystanders would struggle to connect him to the bone-eating shamans who fed on humans. I've never seen so many bone-eating shamans in my life. Looks like all the bone-eating tribes in the entire Mist Province have failed to escape. Did he capture us just to make us kill one another? I don't know. He must have his reasons for not killing us. Perhaps he's just toying with us. We have to escape. What's that? The 6 of them conversed with one another. Suddenly, tremendous killing intent surged towards them. Gazing towards the center of the battlefield, a streak of blood-red light knocked away the bone-eating shamans in their way. Weapons whistled over. There was only a single person, the Azura commander with the spiky club. The Azura commander was currently engaged in a massacre in the Sea of People, but he also found it boring. A one-sided slaughter like this brought him extremely limited benefits. Suddenly, he sensed 6 powerful auras descend, and he could not help but laugh aloud, charging over. Be careful. He seems to be an Azura. There's no grievance between us. I'll go talk to him. Maybe he's also that man's lackey, specially coming to kill us. If we can't get through to him, humph, do you think the 6 of us are afraid of him? Anyone who doesn't contribute at this time can just wait to die. Are you an Azura? Why don't we sit down and have a talk? Don't become someone's tool. The hunchbacked old man stepped forward. His eyes were shining brightly, and his voice was sometimes high and sometimes low. There were countless ups and downs in every sentence, making people feel extremely uncomfortable. He quietly cast a witchcraft that affected one's mind. If he wanted to establish his identity as a leader, his chances of survival would increase. The Azura general's speed increased by another 30%. In the blink of an eye, he arrived and smashed his mace down with a sinister smile. Overwhelming strength, even a mountain peak would be smashed to pieces. At the same time, it contained countless transformations, sealing off the hunchbacked old man's retreat. If he had not seen it with his own eyes, Li Qingshan would not have believed that a mace could actually execute such an exquisite move. The hunchbacked old man raised his walking stick in horror, and his body emitted waves of invisible power to resist the mace. The 2 forces collided violently, and the walking stick was pressed down inch by inch. He shouted, "Come and save me." The 5 people behind him did not deliberately leave him in the lurch, and they attacked together. The Azura general's eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. With a furious roar, the mace burst forth with a dazzling red light. With a bang, the hunchbacked old man was smashed into a pile of meat paste. Then, he was sent flying by the attack that followed, but a delighted smile appeared on his face. Outside the Azura field, Li Qingshan saw this and could not help but grin. They were trying to influence an Azura commander's mind in the Azura field. Was there something wrong with their heads? In reality, although the shaman priests of many shaman tribes in the Mist Province could use powerful, mysterious, and ancient shaman arts that even cultivators feared, they were all specialized in a single aspect. They were nowhere near as versatile as the techniques of cultivators, and their bodies were even weaker. Once they were suppressed, especially when they faced a super warrior like the Azura commander, their fates would obviously be very miserable. Although the Azura general had taken their combined attack and suffered a few severe wounds on his body, as an Azura general who specialized in close combat, this was not much of an injury at all. In the time it took for him to fly out, he had mostly recovered. As soon as he landed loudly on the ground, he immediately leapt out of the dust and flew into the air, gazing down at the 5 remaining bone-eating shamans. He raised his mace high into the air, and his battle intent and murderousness became even heavier. However, the first reaction of the 5 bone-eating shamans after sending the Azura commander flying was not to pursue him. Instead, they fought over the meat paste on the ground, directly shoving it into their mouths. Their mouths immediately widened to an unbelievable degree, and they swallowed the meat paste without even chewing it. If it were not for the fact that a powerful enemy was right beside them and they were in a predicament, they would basically throw their lives at each other for the sake of the brain core and the skull. The tiny bit of tacit understanding they had just developed vanished completely. When the Azura commander turned around and lunged over, the 5 of them were still on guard. The Azura commander's gaze locked onto the bone-eating shaman priest at the very back. His battle instincts told him to defeat this person first, but the other 4 would definitely stop him. Although the 4 of them were weaker than him in terms of physique and skill in battle, they were not easy to deal with even if they worked together. Just who was the master of this Azura field? Who cares? I'll just kill them all. The only remaining shaman priest also waved his staff and unleashed an invisible power, but he did not fight to the death with the Azura commander. Instead, he turned around and fled, whistling away with nothing to rely on. He actually moved very quickly. Because he had been casting shaman arts from afar, he did not even get close to the battle just now, so he was filled with resentment. His body was the weakest here, so he was completely afraid of letting the Azura commander approach him, afraid that he would follow in the footsteps of the old man and be torn apart and eaten. Now that he had fled, none of the remaining 4 were willing to take the blame. They all had to digest their newfound power, so they all turned around and fled in different directions. What the hell is this group of people? Li Qingshan rubbed his forehead. Originally, he was still worried whether the situation would become unbalanced if it was 6 against 1, but he could not help but admit he was wrong now. This was clearly 1 against 6. Hidden in the space, Yin Qing was taken aback too. Originally, she planned on waiting until both sides were heavily injured before finding an opportunity to assassinate them, but she never thought the second heavenly tribulation bone-eating shamans would scatter in all directions after just a single clash. The Azura commander missed, which angered him instead of delighting. He spat viciously and chose the slowest one to chase after. But clearly, speed was his weakness. Even the slowest bone-eating shaman was slightly faster than him. Carrying a ferocious and heavy mace was obviously not an advantage in a long-distance race. It was not easy to catch one within a radius of a few hundred miles. Chapter 849. Yin Qing hid in space, just about to consider whether she should strike or not. Her target should be the shaman priest who fled first. Someone with a weak body like that was the best prey for assassins. In the past, assassinating someone like that was basically a piece of cake. Now, she was 30 to 50% confident. She lurked in space quietly, like a cheetah crouching in the bushes, waiting for an opportunity to appear. The bone-eating shaman priest sensed nothing, flying to the edge of the Azura field in a single breath. Just now, he stopped and began attempting to break through the region. The other bone-eating shamans attempted the same thing, either attacking with shaman arts or using their fists. Li Qingshan was unfazed, suppressing the Azura field firmly. Seeing how he was unable to break through the spatial barrier, the bone-eating shaman priest could not help but panic. He closed his eyes and chanted, unleashing all of his powers, but his back was wide open. Yin Qing's eyes narrowed. She gripped the circular blade firmly and struck out instinctively. At the same time, an invisible power enveloped her. The scenery around her changed, and she had already been moved out of the Azura field, arriving in the 8-point hall. Yin Qing let out a very gloomy sigh. "What orders do you have, my king?" Li Qingshan sat on the ground, holding the Azura field in one hand and rubbing his chin with the other. He was in thought. Little and leaned against his side quietly as her seaweed-like hair flowed down. Yin Qing could not help but glance at her a few more times. She secretly compared them inside and developed a hint of jealousy. She smiled self-deprecatingly and sighed inside. She really had been in this human world for too long. When fighting in the Azura field, who cared about appearances? All that mattered was the strength of the body and the level of martial skill. She was just far too outstanding. Her bearing was like that of a person of the heavenly way, yet different. Her strength was startlingly great too. Who knew where he found her? Don't do anything for now. I've gone to so much trouble to capture them unscathed. If they die all of a sudden, it'll be far too much of a waste. Li Qingshan said without even raising his head, paying attention to the Azura field. Sure enough, the Azura commander with the spiked club could not catch up to the bone-eating shaman. He cursed aloud before leaning on the spiked club and sitting down on a small hill. He called out, "Who's the master of this Azura field? Get your ass out here and eat my club." Naturally, no one responded, so he simply put his hands on his waist and cursed at the sky, his voice shaking the heavens. However, It was clear that he had fought in the Azura realm for a long time. His vocabulary was not very rich, and he kept cursing. Should I promise these bone-eating shamans that as long as they kill this Azura commander, I'll spare them so that I can incite their passion for battle? Li Qingshan muttered to himself. Ignore them, Little and suddenly said. Why? The Azura field has become even stronger, while the bone-eating shamans have very weak mental fortitude and cultivation, so they'll be influenced more and more deeply. There's going to be a battle in the end. If we try to seduce or force them, it won't be good. It's better to let nature take its course, Little said. The Azura field spanned several hundred kilometers. It was not exactly large, but it was not exactly small either. The Azura commander's speed was his weakness, but as long as he remained in the center and walked in any direction, he could reach the boundary in a while. He could threaten these bone-eating shamans at any time. This game of hide-and-seek could not last for too long. If these bone-eating shamans did not want to die, they had to work together and fend off him. By the time the influence of the Azura field grew deeper and deeper, and they could no longer maintain their rationality, it would be too late. Sure enough, she's the one scheming, Yin Qing thought. Then she asked, this will definitely take up a lot of time. I can't stay outside forever. If she stayed in the Azura field, then the club-wielding Azura commander would definitely treat her as an enemy and attack her as well. It would not be particularly dangerous, but it would still be very troublesome, and it would interfere with the battle. Little said, that's exactly what I want you to stay in there. However, it's not to assassinate them during the chaos, but to maintain the balance. Let them clash a few more times. It might be a little depressing, but you can say it's a way to hone their battle spirit. Sure enough, it's all part of her plan. Yin Qing sighed inside. He really was not as pure as he seemed on the surface. As she gazed into his clear, deep eyes, they seemed to be empty, reflecting nothing at all, which made her shiver inside. She could not help but think of the strike she had used to assassinate the myriad poison ancestor on Savage Mountain. It's a good idea, but Yin Qing is still recovering, so you better forget about it. Li Qingshan shook his head. No, this is also to help me recover my strength, so I should do my part. Some pressure isn't a bad thing. It's time for me to experience the atmosphere of the battlefield. Please send me back, my king. Yin Qing thought of something and said, though, I have a request. I hope my king can agree to it. What? Even if I face life-threatening danger, don't lend me a hand, and don't teleport me away if there's nothing important. That's a battlefield, Yin Qing said. Alright, I promise you. Soon after Yin Qing entered the Azura field, the Azura commander discovered her. After all, it was impossible for her to hide in space the entire time. That was far too taxing on her, and coupled with her injuries, it was even more impossible. However, she was extremely fast, and she could teleport away as well. If she fled blindly, there was nothing the Azura commander could do about her. He cursed again out of anger, but he did not let his guard down at all. As an Azura, he understood the dangers of his own kind the most, let alone an assassin. Under the blood-red swirl, the battle continued. The battle continued for another half a day. The ground had already absorbed enough blood, and blood flowed everywhere. Pools of blood formed in the river. Suddenly, a powerful aura emerged from the depths of the swirl, immediately drawing everyone's attention. Li Qingshan beamed with joy. Another one has come. I wonder what weapon it is this time. When he saw the weapon in the Azura commander's hand, he could not help but open his mouth slightly. His expression became extremely strange. A month later, the chaotic battle in the Azura field finally came to an end. With 100,000 bone-eating shamans as sacrifices, the Azura field had become even stronger. Little had also obtained sufficient resources to cultivate, and not only had Yin Qing's strength recovered, but she had even made it to a whole new level. Just when everyone was happy, Li Qingshan let out a long sigh. He wielded an Azura armament in each hand, with a spiked club in his left hand and a spiked club in his right. Although the style differed drastically, with one dark and heavy, primitive and brutal, while the other shone with light and exquisite, they were clearly the same weapon, spiked clubs. Fuck. Only 2 Azura commanders have come, and they both use weapons as obscure as spiked clubs. It's not like your brothers by blood. Li Qingshan tossed the 2 spiked clubs onto the ground. The ground trembled and produced 2 great craters. This was not just because of Li Qingshan's strength, but also because the 2 spiked clubs were extremely heavy. Each one weighed over 5,000 kilograms. Little and comforted him. Spiked clubs are great too, and you even have 2 of them. Li Qingshan said furiously, "What's great about them? Only the damn extras in the stronghold use spiked clubs, and you're even carrying 2 of them. That's so lame." Little and tilted her head. Even with how clever she was, she had no idea what kind of exotic beasts these damn extras were. Anyway, they were not particularly powerful. Yin Qing smiled resplendently. Li Qingshan glared at her, and she cleared her throat. "My king, I actually think this suits you better than the sword. With the insight I've honed in the Azura realm, you shouldn't have taken the path of the sword in the first place. Then what should I take? The path of spiked clubs?" Li Qingshan swung the spiked clubs in his hands viciously. Cough cough, I've never heard of that before. Yin Qing held back her laughter as she let the 2 vicious spiked clubs swing back and forth in front of her, creating a fierce gale. Li Qingshan was extremely domineering, and Little and couldn't help but nod. That does make sense. Qingshan, aren't you quite comfortable using them? Li Qingshan's body stiffened, and he suddenly put away the spiked clubs. He couldn't help but think about what Yin Qing had said. Back then, he had cultivated the way of the sword largely because of the cursive sword calligraphy. Little and had comprehended a set of exquisite sword techniques and then taught it to him, which were much better than using other weapons. As he walked step by step, he had gotten used to it, and he had never thought about changing weapons. However, after he completely repaired the 3 Absolutes calligraphy, he had this thought instead. The way of the sword contained within the 3 Absolutes calligraphy was indeed profound and mysterious, forming a style of its own. However, the more it was like this, the more he felt uncoordinated. It was similar to the feeling he had when he cultivated the Phoenix Sutra of Nerva. He always felt that he was lacking that little bit, and it was difficult for him to comprehend its essence. If Li Qingshan's comprehension was poor, then how could a peerless divine ability like the 9 transformations of the demonic and divine be simple? What kind of person was the 5 Absolutes immortal? He was the reincarnation of a celestial being, unparalleled in the world in the 4 arts, chess, and calligraphy. He had fused the way of the sword into calligraphy and painting, and was unparalleled in his generation. What kind of person was Li Qingshan? He had started out in the wilderness of a mountain village and had slaughtered his way to where he was now. His mind was filled with the 3 vulgar thoughts of fighting powerful enemies, drinking good wine, and sleeping with beautiful women. He was lustful, but he could forget about being romantic. To put it bluntly, in essence, they were 2 completely opposite people. As a result, he couldn't see any sword techniques from the cursive sword calligraphy back then, and he couldn't comprehend the way of the sword with the 3 Absolutes calligraphy now. Perhaps he had truly chosen the wrong weapon. He had to cultivate the Phoenix Sutra of Nerva, but his weapon didn't necessarily have to be a sword. As a result, he asked Yin Qing, "What weapon do you think I should use?" Yin Qing said, "I can't say for sure. You'll have to experience it yourself. I only chose this circular blade after trying many weapons. The various experiments I've tried before have actually been very beneficial. Then let's try this spiked mace first." Li Qingshan muttered to himself before raising the spiked mace in his hand. He found it much more pleasing to the eye. The second spiked mace descended into the Azura field, and the first opponent it found was the first spiked mace. The 2 Azura commanders wielded the same weapon, and after a round of clanging sounds, they fought many more times afterwards. Li Qingshan thought about it for a moment, and he could clearly recall every detail of every battle. Although the spiked mace path was clumsy and ingenious, with all sorts of ingenuity, it was much simpler and more direct than the way of the sword. With a foundation in the way of the sword, learning it was also very easy. In short, all he had to do was smash the enemy. There was no need to use the light-splitting technique or condense chi into threads. However, compared to the spiked mace, Li Qingshan actually missed another weapon more. That weapon had allowed him to realize his own strength for the first time in his life, and it had even helped him kill his first person. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.